Their last 7, they're tied with the Blazers. They do have the tiebreak, but awfully close to that play-in tournament, to which LeBron poo-poos Stephen A. Smith this response.
The Lakers should not be this bad without LeBron James. Yeah, you don't have to be what you were with him, but you could at least be a 500 team. The fact that you've fallen off to this degree should say something, particularly when you played with LeBron enough. You've been with him enough to know what you're supposed to be doing, even when he's not on the floor.
More Laker news. Woj reporting Dennis Schroeder expected to miss up to 2 weeks. Health and safety protocols. He's missed 4 games earlier in February in contact tracing. In the meantime, from baseball, bad news for the Dodgers. Dustin May, their strong right-hander, will have season-ending Tommy John surgery tomorrow. The Brewers getting back Christian Yelich and Lorenzo Cain into the lineup against the Phillies tonight. Cain has gone deep, but the Phils lead this one in the third, 4-1, playing without Bryce Harper. He's resting that ailing wrist. Mets and Cardinals, it's an ESPN Plus game. St. Louis has jumped out 1-0 in that one. Shohei Ohtani scratched from tonight's start against the Rays, but he is in the lineup for the Angels. And Louis Robert, the terrific outfield for the White Sox, a complete tear of his hip flexor, out up to 4 months.
Hey, it's Greeny Tuesday. Much more on the NFL draft. I'll tell you all the picks people weren't talking nearly enough about, and a special green list based on May the 4th be with you. See you then, Greeny, starting 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN Plus.
Isn't this a sports show?
The bigger news of the day, though, is something that was taking us over an hour to get to because, ta-da, two thumbs pointing at this show.
Almost entirely.
I started a website, PatrickMahomesPictures.com.
Are you Googling PatrickMahomesPictures.com?
It's available!
This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco.
I don't have to talk entirely sports for 2 hours. I talk almost entirely sports for 2 hours a day.
Take the show with you by listening on the Sports Radio 810 mobile app at 810WHB.com or by searching for Almost Entirely Sports wherever you get your podcasts.
We don't have to do what you tell us to. We do what we want. You can't stop us.
This is Almost Entirely Sports on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Another NFL draft is finally in the books. We have 6 new members of the Kansas City Chiefs to talk about, and I genuinely think all of them are fascinating in their own ways, some in their talent, some in their ways that they will fit with the Kansas City Chiefs. At some point this week, we might even talk about an undrafted free agent or two. Personally, I'm hoping that at some point this week we're talking about a veteran or two. We'll talk about that at some point tonight as well. But this show is going to be all draft all the time because there's so much to discuss. And I was telling Rudy Salazar, who is here right now on the other side of the console, Beards McFly on the other side of the glass. I was telling Rudy whenever I got in today that I feel like I'm flying without a net in some ways, and I have amended this a little bit. But I came in with virtually no, player notes or anything written down at this point because, as Beards knows, I was in this exact chair for every single one of the picks the Kansas City Chiefs made. I hopped on afterwards. I brought you all the press conferences live. I was here soaking up all of the Chiefs draft content from these last few days, all day Friday, all night Friday, all day Saturday. I feel like I know the families of these players at this point, and I certainly know what I think is most interesting about all of them. But if you guys open the Google Docs, I think Beards is in it already. I do have the things that we've heard about these players. We'll hear from Brett Veach. He was also maybe the most interesting Brett Veach presser we've heard in a while. I didn't feel like he was just lying to us about what he was about to do in terms of the tackle position and everything. So I'm excited to get you some of the clips that some things Brett Veach said today. We've got area scouts. We've got directors of personnel. It was a very fun, very busy couple of days here going through this process. But I feel, as I'm saying about, having a Google Doc that has now filled out, but was at one point very, very sparse. I just feel like I have internalized a ton about these guys already, and they've been members of the Kansas City Chiefs for 2 or 3 days. But that's what we're going to unpack over the course of the show here today. And if you want to get involved with the show, however you see fit. You can do it in a number of ways. You can watch the show and comment and interact on our Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch channels. Or if you're listening live now but you want to catch up later, you can grab the podcast. You go to aes.show whenever you wherever you are on the internet. You can search for Almost Entirely Sports wherever you get your podcasts, or of course, you can listen right here live tonight. We'll talk to Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest as we do every week at 8 o'clock tonight. And then at 9, we'll talk to our draft guru, Jordan Foote, who completed 100 and 100. We talked to him last week in our draft preview show. I want to look back at the draft with him now because I'm very curious to see what he thought about some of these guys as he was reviewing them along the way over the course of his 100 and 100 series. He got several of them reviewed ahead of time when that series the Chiefs did end up actually selecting. And I'm excited to hear from him as well. We'll talk to him at 9, Matt Derrick at 8. Myself, Joshua Brisco, Rudy Salazar, Beards McFly, all here with you for 3 hours tonight with plenty to talk about. You leave your comments on Twitch and everything, and we will we'll sift through those. If you've got like straight up draft player questions, I'll be here to get through some of those, especially later on tonight, because I think you're gonna probably bring up some questions that I'll be able to answer that maybe aren't incredibly obvious at this point because I am deep in it right now, deep into this draft coverage. So here's I like the 30,000-foot view, right? Here's a 30,000-foot view. Here is my thoughts on the class as a whole, and then I've got stuff, I've got clips, I've got everything on every single one of these players along the way. But here's where I think we need to begin. This draft class, at least outside of the first 2 rounds, and maybe in the first 2 rounds as well, we'll figure that out over time, but at least in their final 4 picks, this is a draft that is even more than your usual draft, is going to predominantly be about best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I don't necessarily mean it as an endorsement either, I guess. But it is a draft about best case scenarios and worst case scenarios. What do I mean? Great question. Me.
What do you mean, Josh?
Thank you, Beards. You've got guys like Joshua Kaindoh, the edge out of Florida State, who the best case scenario is that he gets back to his high school level recruitment. He gets healthy and gets with Steve Spagnuolo, and all of a sudden you see an absolute menace of an athlete looking like a menace of an edge rusher at the NFL level. If not this year, maybe next year. The worst case scenario, I'm just starting with him because he's the first one of this range that definitely belongs in that conversation. The worst case scenario is that he never puts it together, never sees the field, and he's a 4th round pick that essentially disappears into thin air. You could say an incredibly similar thing about Noah Gray, an undersized tight end who could be used perfectly in the Chiefs offense and also could be a guy who ends up playing a number of roles in this Chiefs offense. Or maybe by being undersized and not really having a position, he'll never see the field. Cornell Powell, is he going to be speedy enough to earn a spot in this offense? Can he end up beating out a Demarcus Robinson or a McCole Hardman? Will he even be able to beat out a Byron Pringle, a Marcus Kemp, a Garrick Dieter? What will what dominant trait does he have? I'm not 100% sure there is one. That's the downside, right? Maybe he never gets to sift through all of the depth that this receiver room has without necessarily having the ceiling outside of Tyreek Hill and arguably McCole Hardman, Demarcus Robinson, arguably. The best case scenario, though, is that he's a guy that I'm stealing this phrase from someone who was tweeting about it on draft day. I continue my streak of being incredible at remembering things people say but forgetting who said it. But maybe he ends up being a guy who you never have to design a play for and cleans up, finds himself getting open, and is there for your 7-yard gains whenever everything else is covered or down the field or moving around. Whenever defenses get distracted by all the speed, maybe he, with his big body, his kind of post-up ability that we'll get into more later, maybe he's going to be able to be the guy that cleans up in the way that you wanted Sammy Watkins to, but just he struggled to even when he was healthy, especially last year. Was good at it when he was healthy 2 years ago. Best case scenario, worst case scenario. Best case scenario for Trey Smith is that his medicals are clear. He is just a filthy football player in pretty much every sense of the word. I loved watching. I've loved the clips of him that I've seen so far. And he could be an absolute steal as a 226th overall pick. Also, he's there because of blood clots and a lung concern. You see how all four of those guys, especially, they have this tremendous range of outcomes. And really extreme ones. There's probably a space somewhere in the middle where all those guys, hit the middle of their road. They don't hit their absolute ceiling. They don't hit their absolute floor. But these are super high variance prospects. And honestly, for all four of those guys, very, very, very little would truly surprise me. All four of them have a best case scenario that ends up with them being really valuable starting NFL players, and all four of them have a worst case scenario that has them struggling to be on this team 2 and 3 years from now. And I just think that's really interesting. Again, that's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. I just think it's a fascinating thing. And Brett Veach talked a lot over the course of his presser about taking the best player available. That was really what they ended up doing. So, hey, look, we're gonna go through our board. We're gonna take the best player who's there, and if they end up filling a need, works out that way, then great. We'll get to some of that from him in a little bit. But your best player available, if you're picking by ceiling, I believe that these were the best players available at that time. If you're picking by certainty, they almost certainly were not the most certain surefire players on the board at that point. And I guess I will say, to make a little bit of a value judgment on that, I kind of like that mindset, especially later on. I do not particularly care for that mindset with your first and second round picks. I'm going to get ahead of myself a little bit, but Josh Kando is a super volatile, again, high variance player who needs some sanding off of the edges, but has an amount of talent that could be really, really impactful, really valuable. I don't mind taking that shot at pick 144 at all. I would rather you not take that shot at pick 59 with Tano Passanio, or certainly trading up to pick 46 for Breland Speaks. Those guys are all three of them are tremendously different types of players. Please don't hear me say all three of those names and think that Josh Kando is either Tano Passanio or Breland Speaks. He's neither of those guys, and neither of them are related to each other. Those are all very different players, but what they do share is that sense memory of, wait a second, did he say developmental edge rusher? Oh, God. Breland Speaks is never on the ground. Tano Passanio is never in the backfield. Oh no, what are we doing here? But if they would have taken Breland Speaks or Tano at pick 144, we would review those picks much less harshly. Because at that point, you're trying to find guys, ideally, with high ceilings. Now, last year, that's not how the draft went, which is one of the reasons I think this is the part of it that might be most interesting to me, especially if you're looking at it from Brett Veach's perspective, or looking at Brett Veach or the front office as a whole. Because I really do. This weekend was a good reminder, and also Beards could probably attest to this. This weekend was a good reminder that Brett Veach is not silently going through all of this tape on his own. We're hearing from area scouts, directors of college personnel, director of college scouting, director of pro personnel, right? We're hearing from all of these guys. I mean, we heard just on Friday and Saturday, we heard from Ryan Poles, assistant director of player personnel. We heard from Mike Bradway. We heard from David Hinson, area scout. We heard from Ryan Nutt, director of college scouting. We heard from Tim Terry, the other director of pro personnel. We heard from Matt Sperduto, an area scout. We heard from Mike Borgonzi, director of football ops. Those guys all have really important voices in the war room, as far as I can tell, as does a guy like Brendan Daly and Steve Spagnuolo. But if you do look at it through just sort of the Chiefs front office spectrum, Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not a high variance pick. You had a very good idea of what he was going to be and how impactful he's capable of being because he's a running back. Willie Gay, probably a more high variance pick. Lucas Niang, I think a pretty safe pick. We'll see if that ends up being true, but you can see him being a right tackle, or if not that, then kicking into guard. He just had to deal with injuries. I'm not sure why he went as late as he did. L'Jarius Sneed, a good high variance pick that's working very well. A guy from a small college wouldn't have surprised me if L'Jarius Sneed never would have played a snap last year. Instead, he ended up being one of this defense's best players. Mike Dana, not a high variance pick. Also, I think has a relatively limited range of outcomes, and if he hits that on the high end, he's a valuable rotational piece. Probably won't be more than that. I just think that's all pretty interesting because it's not that the Chiefs play by the same playbook all the time. Hardman, Thornhill, Colin Saunders, Rashad Fenton, Darwin Thompson, Nick Allegretti, all relatively high variance guys where the worst case scenario and best case scenario occupy a large range of space. But again, I think Clyde and Niang, you have a pretty good idea of what they're going to be able to be on the next level. It's not, a stop set here and a stop set there. It's not brackets, but it's like a bell curve. Think of it as a bell curve. I really think that the curve for Joshua Kaindoh is incredibly spread out, where there's a huge chance that he ends up doing something on either end of the spectrum, which again, at pick 144, I think is a pretty good thing. We'll also talk about the guys above that because I do think that I think I could put money down on what Creed Humphrey's NFL career is probably going to look like, and I would feel pretty confident about it. Nick Bolton maybe is the same deal there, but whatever those guys hit in terms of their ceilings and floors obviously matters a tremendous amount, especially with picks that high. But I think the last 4 picks of this draft, and really, I'm going to show my hand here. I'm going to tip my hand a little bit. I think the last 5 picks of this draft class are the 5 most interesting ones in many ways, which only leaves their first pick being Nick Bolton. So we'll work through. Why are you shaking? I was going to throw it to you, Rudy.
Such a hater.
No, I'm not a hater. I don't think it's that interesting. Here's what I'll tell you. I was just about to throw it to you and see what you thought of the class as a whole, and then we can get into some of these guys specifically, and I'll start with Nick Bolton. I'm not going to say anything else about Nick Bolton. I'm going to let you take the wheel. You tell me how you're feeling about the whole class. If you buy my logic here, and then I'll talk about Nick Bolton.
Yeah, they didn't draft a quarterback, so
yeah, true.
I got some problems.
Yeah, fair.
That's it.
That's your whole take?
No.
I'm gonna take. I opened my shaker bottle so I can get a long drink.
So honestly, I actually think we're a little similar opinions there. Where I really like the picks that they made towards the end of the draft, especially Trey Smith. Trey Smith's a guy I watched at Tennessee a handful of times.
Oh yeah, you probably saw him. You probably saw him do push-ups off some Kentucky defenders.
Well, the thing is, Kentucky. We actually. I almost said we've handled Tennessee well, but that's a lie. Tennessee has been bad the last 6-7 years, but the one team they seem to be good against is Kentucky. But we did beat them this last year. We finally got him. It was like Mark Stoops' first time beating Tennessee. Finally got him.
That's all fine and good. Real quick on Trey Smith. I think Seth has tweeted out some of these clips. You will find clips of Trey Smith pancaking dudes, and then I'm not kidding. Mm-hmm. He will fall on them, and then he will it seriously looks like he's about to do a push-up where he is laying on this dude on the ground, and then will sort of body slam him again.
Yeah,
it's nasty. I would not want to get blocked by him.
He truly is an incredible talent. Who, if not for, essentially just some injury concerns, right?
Yeah.
He is going earlier than the 6th round. A guy his size with his strength and with he's more athletic than a guy that big should necessarily be.
Yeah.
I don't really know a ton out of Cornell Powell. I'll be honest. Even though Clemson's a big team, I did not see a lot of him this year. But just from everything I've read and seen on Twitter and stuff, I was disappointed they did not draft a receiver sooner.
Me too.
I still am.
Yeah.
Nothing. I in an ideal world they would have drafted Cornell Powell and. I'm just gonna say
Brown, Terrace Marshall Jr.
De'Ami Brown was the name I mentioned a lot before the draft because I thought Terrace Marshall Jr. would be long gone.
Yeah.
When Terrace Marshall Jr. was there at 58, it hurt not drafting him. And that is nothing against Nick Bolton. It's not Nick Bolton's fault. He's fine. He's a good player, and he can bring value to the team. Now, part of this is where we are just kind of assuming both him and Willie Gay Jr. will be good. It's probably fair to assume, considering they were both 2nd-round picks, that at the very least they should be above average players in the NFL.
So is Reggie Ragland.
Yeah, and having eventually, obviously this year going to have Hitchens. If next year you have your two starting linebackers are on rookie deals, that allows you to spend a little bit of money defensively elsewhere, right? There is value in that.
100%.
Terrence Marshall Jr. seems like he would have brought a lot more value.
So let me throw this at you here, because this is my here's my offer to you. Door number one
It's a boat.
is a boat. No, door number one is, and by the way, I think I can tell you the answer on Terrace Marshall Jr. By the way, he was off the board for medicals. We'll hear this more with Trey Smith later on. I don't know. This is like back alley stuff. Veach said this morning when they talked about Trey, they were talking about Trey Smith.
The reason why he fell in the draft was because of a foot injury, if I remember right.
No, his knee, there's knee stuff.
Yeah.
It's a whole deal.
I knew he had injuries, which is the only reason why he dropped even that far.
Yes, so because whenever Veach was talking about Trey Smith, we'll get to that audio later in the show. Hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood. He says, "Hey, we're usually one of the more conservative teams in the NFL in terms of taking guys off our board with medicals. If there's a gray area, I feel pretty confident that he was severe. His ranking on their board was severely hurt strictly by medicals. I don't know if that's true with De'Ami Brown. It might be. I think there's also little medical stuff around him, but also it's football. And a lot of guys have medical issues. But let me. Here's your door number one, door number two thing. This is mostly talking about Nick Bolton, okay? And we'll get into some of the specifics on him in a second. Z-Man on Twitch says, why draft Bolton in round 2 when he could have gotten Nick Neiman in the 6th? If I offered you De'Ami Brown or Terrace Marshall Jr., your pick, right, at 58 overall, and you could bring back Damian Wilson for $1 million, $2 million, whatever he signed with Jacksonville for, to come play your Sam spot, right? Or you get Demarcus Robinson and Nick Bolton. Because those are equivalent. That the money is very similar, and the acquisition cost is very similar. You could have had De'Ami Brown and Damian Wilson, or you could have had De'Ami Brown and Nick Neiman, who I would not have hated, because I don't know who the will linebacker is on this roster right now, because I don't really think it's Nick Bolton, even though we're going to hear Brett Veach in a second tell me it's Nick Bolton. Yeah. If you said, hey, you could have De'Ami Brown and Nick Neiman and Damian Wilson, instead of having Demarcus Robinson, Nick Bolton, and Cornell Powell, I would rather have door number 2. I'll say it that way. I'm not trying to hate on Nick Bolton. I think his future he will have a role here. And in many ways, much like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he's going to do something great, and I'm going to get tweets about it, and everyone's going to misunderstand my actual opinion. I am not mad that the Chiefs.
It's a good pick.
I was not happy that the Chiefs took a running back in the first round last year. That felt like a personal attack on my soul. Taking Nick Bolton here, I just don't think is the best use of their draft capital. It's not the same thing as lighting your money on fire. If you know the pang you feel whenever you buy something and it's not quite as good as you wanted it to be. You realize after the fact, I probably could have spent that money a little bit more wisely on something that would have been more beneficial. That's kind of how I feel about them taking Nick Bolton. When they took Clyde last year, I knew that not only was I going to get tased and was it not where I would have spent that money, also it was going to be a deeply frustrating conversation point for the next year or so. And it might include next year also. We'll see how it all goes. I'm not there with Nick Bolton. But I do think there are a couple instances of fit, of positional value, and of what he's the best at, and where the Chiefs see his fit being. He is here to be an Anthony Hitchens replacement next year. I'm going to play Brett Veach audio for you here in just a second. Beard, you can fire this one up and get this one ready. Brett Veach on Nick Bolton and where he plays. Because Veach is about to tell you, almost as clearly as I don't know if I've ever heard Brett Veach essentially say, he's here to replace a veteran that we love whenever we cut him next year. But Brett Veach essentially says that here. Whatever Bolton does in 2021 is going to be secondary to 2022 and beyond in the Chiefs' mind. And that is as a cheaper replacement for Anthony Hitchens that can maybe do some of that, as Seth Kaiser wrote in his Chief of the North newsletter. We'll talk to him about this tomorrow night. But as he wrote there, maybe a little faster, maybe a little quicker. But he is not a fix in coverage. He wasn't asked to do a lot in coverage at Mizzou. And I'm not totally sure where he's going to fit this year. What does that mean in the meantime? I don't know. Is that a good selection for your first pick at 58 overall in a draft? I don't know. I think I can make you an argument for why it's good for the long term. I was telling you the last couple of weeks, I think one of the most important thing for this draft class is what it's going to do in terms of hitting now to free up money later on to be able to account for things like Mahomes' deal, Orlando Brown's deal, Tyrann Mathieu' eventual extension, Tyreek Hill's eventual extension, all of that. I have no problem with that at all. But if you're not going to have a guy play until his second year, I would probably rather have that guy come later in the draft and just keep Anthony Hitchens for another year or two.
And to go off on this, this draft to a degree feels like that. Like it's the reason why they draft Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith. You know what the best way to offset massive contracts at left tackle and left guard is to have rookie deals at center, right guard, and right tackle.
Absolutely.
And now this is more to an extreme, but with a Kendo. Best way to replace Frank Clark's money, in theory, or to have somebody opposite Frank Clark, so you don't have to go out and sign an Alex Okafor, is to have the defensive end on a rookie deal. Now again, Kane, I think expecting the last pick in the 4th round to come in and necessarily be an impact player, probably not going to happen. But he is a guy, like you said, he is a tall, long defensive end who is flexible, and those are guys who have the potential to be excellent. Like those are the traits you want out of your pass rushers, because when you look at great pass rushers, that's what all the great pass rushers have. That
right.
They're tall, they're long, they're flexible. That's what they do.
That's you extrapolating on this draft being for the future and for future flexibility. That's okay logic. I love that for your mid-round picks.
Yes.
I'm a little more lukewarm on it whenever I have a chance to take De'Ami Brown, to take Terrace Marshall Jr., to take one of those guys towards the end of the second round. They could hopefully make an impact now and later. Listen to what Brett Veach says here, though, about Nick Bolton, where he fits in this defense and what the plan's going to be for how he fits on this team.
Well, we certainly had a lot of opportunities to watch Nick Bolton play, being local and just a great player. And he's both these guys. I think we not only got better on the offense and defensive side, but both these guys, you talk about their intelligence, their durability, and their leadership skills. I mean, these are 2 high character players, and people are going to be great in the community. They're going to be great in the locker room. They're going to come in. They're going to learn the playbook quickly. They're going to get up to speed. A lot of this, especially last year with having OTAs, and this year, hopefully we get into these OTAs, but I'm sure it'll be a little bit different than in years past. You got to get into the playbook and you got to get caught up to speed quick. But both these guys, Adam, I mean, they're extremely intelligent. Both captains, leaders, guys that played a ton of football at their respective universities. So I think both these guys, you talk about Nick Bolton. I mean, he's a guy that can come in here and play, and both at the Mike position and the Will position. He's got sideline to sideline range. Again, tough, smart, can make all the calls, has made all the calls. You look at Anthony Hitchens, and he's one of the guys that does a lot for us. But when Hitch goes down, we're really looking to add depth there. And then again, his versatility to play either Mike or Will.
So the reason that's cut weird, and also you mentioned them, it's a question about both Bolton and Creed Humphrey, but I cut it before I got to the Creed stuff because we're gonna get to the Creed clip in a second.
We'll get there.
The thing at the end, though, the little hanging participle there at the end. He says he thinks he can play the Mike and the Will positions. I think he can probably play the Mike. I think that probably ends up happening, being in the middle of the defense and replacing Hitchens. But he says when Hitch goes down, Anthony Hitchens hasn't been dealing with nagging injuries. I think he missed some COVID time towards the end of last year. But this is essentially how Nate Taylor framed it. I was talking to him for Times Ours earlier this morning. He said, he's talking there about whenever Hitch goes down permanently, whenever Hitch goes down in the books, because they move on from him completely. I understand that that's the plan, and I think that's fine. I just think that it also probably benefits you to have slightly tempered expectations in that regard. Because I think that the plan, if you're going to get Ben Neiman off the field, would be putting Willie Gay at the Sam, which I'm not 100% sure that he's strong enough to really play. You think about Willie Gay versus other previous Sam linebackers, and Seth made this point also that Spags will sort of change that role depending on who's playing there, which I think is a sign of a really good coach. But maybe they can make it work for Willie Gay, but I don't think that's necessarily his natural, like, best fit. Hitch at Mike is his best fit. And then Bolton / Neiman on the weak side. I think Brett Veach is saying that he believes that Bolton can do more in coverage than he was asked to do in college, which I guess is a reasonable thing. I mean, if you're the Mike linebacker, you're probably not, following guys or floating out into that zone as much as you would, if you're in the Mike, you're just kind of hanging out in the middle. I guess that works. The Chiefs do so much in sub packages, though, that if you're going to stay on the field, you really need to be able to stick with guys in coverage in those sub packages. And I'm just a little bit concerned about Bolton being able to do that. And if he's just going to be there to be a sort of a slightly more traditional Mike linebacker that is replacing Hitchens, he does that next year, that's fine. He's just not going to do that while Anthony Hitchens is still on the roster. Yeah. I'd be stunned if he took snaps from Hitchens this year. I think he will. If Hitchens gets hurt, we'll see. Maybe he's more impactful this year than I would have anticipated. And if not, I think we'll see him in 2022. But it's a little bit of an odd pick, especially also. Here's my one other thing. They mentioned the De'Ami Brown or Damian Wilson versus Demarcus Robinson and Nick Bolton. Here's my last thing on Bolton and the linebacker thing for now. I don't know how much you can move a needle going from an average linebacker to an above average linebacker, or even a good one to a great one. If you are elite in all phases of the game, then I think there's a chance you move the needle that way. Those guys go top 5, top 10. And if you have a nightmare at linebacker, that is a problem. If you have a nightmare anywhere on the field, that one weakness can exploit everything. Yeah. But that's why Damian Wilson is on a roster. Damian Wilson will not get you in trouble as long as you're asking him to do things that are within his skill set. In some ways, not in every way, in some ways, can you hear the hesitancy in my voice? Mm-hmm. In some ways, I think linebacker has a similar problem to running back, where there's so much else going on. And this could probably also be said about 5 or 6 positions if you're going to scale it down. And this might be a personal hill that I start dying on more often. We'll see. I don't know. But if you're a Sam linebacker or a Mike linebacker, and I guess if you're a disastrous Will win in coverage, but if you are trying to upgrade from merely good to great, I just don't know how much that really improves your defense. A great corner changes your defense. A great safety changes your defense. A great pass rusher changes your defense. A great, run-stuffing nose probably doesn't. A great Mike linebacker, I don't really think changes the dynamic of your defense. A great left tackle can. Can a great left guard? I don't know. The reason you pay Joe Tooney is because you are 100% sure he's not going to get you in trouble. He's never going to be a disaster. Yeah. The reason you play Orlando Brown Jr. is because it should help you free up other stuff elsewhere, and also he'll never get you in trouble. So that's a sliding scale. That again, I may have to revisit that thought. I'm not fully cemented in on that. I'm just that's sort of been a thing I've been thinking out loud about over the last few days, especially in terms of what positions are worth investing in that highly and what positions aren't. And the one thing that makes me a little queasy, or at least a little uneasy, is that the Chiefs really don't seem to give a bleep about positional value right now. And I think it was formerly dead to the show, currently ambivalent to the show, Kent Swanson, who tweeted that the Chiefs' last 4 picks, their last 4 top picks over these last 2 drafts were running back, linebacker, interior offensive lineman. And those are not necessarily value hotspots for a position group. And so I think that bears watching. I think that's interesting. I'm not fuming. And I think we'll take a break whenever we come back. If you're feeling like I'm maybe peeing in the punch bowl a little bit, I'll bring some new punch in this next segment.
Want more Almost Entirely Sports? Watch the show live on the Sports Radio 810 Facebook page.
Choice Beards. I want to take a couple of Twitch questions really quick before we move on to Creed Humphrey. Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest in 20 minutes. Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report in an hour and 20 minutes. Human Torch 101 said, when Josh says we'll get to the audio later in the show, I laugh because of gestures at this show. I mean, that's a very good point.
Great point.
I work so hard to cut all this audio and make sure it's all in the right place. And it's probably going to be something that we sort of leak out over the course of the week. Because there's just too much. There's just too much to talk about, man. There's just too much here. A handful of other comments. First of all, JT, yes, I hate Nick Bolton, and I hate him because he's a Missouri Tiger. That's my natural rival. Mid-American Nazarene University and Mizzou neck and neck. Beards, unmark that. I don't want Mizzou fans mad at me for no reason. Beards, if I give them a reason to be mad at me, fine. But don't take me sarcastically saying I hate Nick Bolton out of context. You're gonna do it again. I don't want to. Beards, I know this sounds like I'm doing a bit, but I did this last year, and then every time Clyde Edwards-Helaire farted 2 yards down the field, I got 57 tweets. I don't want to do that again.
Sounds like a you problem.
Whoever your favorite player is, dear listener, I love them. I want to kiss them on the mouth.
I hate them.
No, don't mark that either.
Unless they went to Kentucky, then I like them.
Z-Man says nothing says current NFL like a small thumper of a linebacker. It's funny. It's overly critical and overly dismissive, but it is funny. There was something else that I wanted. Here's the thing. So, like JT says, he'll force some fumbles and make some stops for a loss that no one on this roster can right now. Damian Wilson made some thumps, and he also wasn't. Because this goes into a couple other facets here. People that zig when everyone else is zagging don't get value. That's not. I mean, that's simply not true. Like there's a reason that teams will swell towards a specific direction in terms of value. But there was a tweet later on.
Run the football.
I'm trying to find.
Are you talking about the one everybody?
Yeah, from Darth Maul Dad.
So
everyone complains about how bad our linebackers are until we draft 2 of them. I'm not really complaining about the linebackers. I wasn't really complaining about the linebackers last year. And the thing that I would be complaining about would be their ability to cover running backs out of the backfield. Like it's typically that. I don't really care if they're able to run the ball 3 or 4 yards at a time. We've been having that conversation for 3 years now, and I'm tired of having the conversation of I don't let your team run the ball against the Chiefs. It's fine. It's not going to matter because Patrick Mahomes plays for them. That's not why they're ever going to lose a football game. It's simply not going to happen. They're not going to lose a meaningful football game to a team that runs for 4 and 5 yards a carry. And if it's more explosive than that, there are much bigger problems at hand. I'm not worried about the linebackers much more than I was worried about the running backs last year. And also, what I don't love is Anthony Hitchens not playing great football at the price tag he was playing at. He played pretty well last year. Also, Willie Gay didn't get on the field. I just don't understand why that's like a checkmate. Why did you breathe out your nose so hard at?
So JT's response to you right there is you freeze a dead possum in a block of ice and put it in the middle of some 190 punch. The goal is to drink it before the ice melts.
JT start doing meth?
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what that means either. I don't know what that means either.
I think there's something about you peeing in the punch bowl.
Yeah, but I'm still confused.
Yeah, I mean
about most of it.
Oh, he said earlier, anyone ever had roadkill punch?
Got it. There it is. Okay, there. Important context.
There we go.
So DJ actually said,
just explaining what roadkill punch is.
DJ on Twitch said, being first in the league and letting up yards to running backs receiving is probably what motivated this pick. Yeah, except for that's not what Nick Bolton's going to do. I mean, maybe he can, but that's not what he ever did in college. That's why I would say you take a shot on Nick Neiman, who is athletic enough to stick with the running back, but you don't really want him on an island against a blocker at the second level ever. Like that's what I would be looking at.
Yeah.
I think that's the specific place that makes sense. And also, he's not gonna unseat Anthony Hitchens this year. Willie Gay got 19 snaps last year in his first year in the system. It's not gonna happen.
Spags loves Hitch. Now to give the Chiefs like some essentially benefit of the doubt, right? Like they clearly scouted Nick Bolton with the thought of, okay, this is what he did in college. What do we think he can do in the NFL?
Yeah, sure.
They clearly think he can. And hey, it's possible it's possible he absolutely can. Maybe he's way better at it. He was just never asked to do it. Sometimes players in college, for whatever reason, are very capable of doing things. They are just never asked to do it because of the system that they're in. And so they don't get the chance to showcase it. And so because they didn't get the chance to showcase it, we just essentially assume they can't do it. When reality is they just never got the chance to do it. I do not know if that's the case with Nick Bolton. The Chiefs certainly believe that is the case to some degree. But again, I think we've said this, I feel like a million times this year and then last year. It's not really about Nick Bolton. It's the position. Like, it's really nothing to do with Nick Bolton. He's a good player.
It's partially about Nick Bolton.
Well,
if you go to the specifics of the position of the linebacker positions, if you go hyper-specific to Sam, Will, Mike, which also, so one other thing from Ice Pyro, aren't linebackers really important in a Seattle-style defense? Rudy, you read that comment during the break, and you made a point that I'll let you make.
Seattle still has really good linebackers. Bobby Wagner's still incredible. Their defense was atrocious this year because the Legion of Boom finally died.
It's your defensive backs, it's your coverage. It's also being able to get to the quarterback.
That's the reason why that team was special was because they had probably the best secondary we've ever seen, which helped their defensive line, which was good, but it helped their defensive line play at an elite level. At least throughout first stretches because they had the best secondary we've ever seen. And Bobby Wagner's a part of that.
Sure,
he still is a really good player, and a large part of the reason why he's a really good player is because of his ability in coverage. That makes him a valuable asset that a lot of teams in the NFL don't have. A lot of teams don't have linebackers that can cover. But the reason why they were great was the Legion of Boom.
And I think there's a perfectly reasonable chance that Nick Bolton is Anthony Hitchens in the future, right?
Mm-hmm.
And can do it at a cheaper cost that ends up being valuable.
Totally valuable. Yes.
That's fine.
Yes.
I don't need anyone to try to convince me that he's actually Derrick Johnson right now, like prime Derrick Johnson, and also better in coverage. I don't really need that at the moment. I don't think that's doing yourself any favors. If you watch Nick Bolton, if you're a Mizzou fan listening, and you watch Nick Bolton play over the course of the last couple of years, God bless you. You watched him be great against lesser competition. I'm not
in the SEC,
where it means more.
We're basically the NFL.
It does just mean more.
I'm not saying Kentucky could beat the Jets, but I think maybe KU could even beat the Jets.
It frustrates me to have to beat up against the door of they didn't draft Superman at 58 overall, and I don't think he forces his way onto the field in the immediate. If he is strictly an Anthony Hitchens replacement, that's fine. But if you're going to have a linebacker that doesn't have to play for a year, maybe, could you get that later? I think he'll be a Chief for a long time. I think he'll be good in the middle of the defense. I think, honestly, in 4 years, we're probably talking about, can they upgrade over Nick Bolton? Can they put another linebacker by him? I think Bolton and Gay next to each other for a few years should be really fun, and there should be enough athleticism there to get you through a range without ever having to worry about linebacker again. They've also just invested 2 second-round picks back-to-back years in that position. So,
I want to point this out. Z-Man says, I'm sure Bolton will play well on first and second down, and then JT kind of goes, hey, if it puts him in third and long consistently, it's worth it. I think one thing that's been overlooked here is, again, that is the old NFL, essentially, right? In today's NFL, on first down, you still throw the ball a lot.
Yeah.
You don't know that it's going to be first and second down the team's going to run, or even first down that the team's going to run, so we're fine with having the guy who can't cover. Every down's a passing down in the league now. Now, against some teams, that's not necessarily true, right? You play against Seattle, like we just said. In Seattle, Pete Carroll's made it very clear he wants to run, pass, punt.
Right.
Run, pass, punt. That's his offense. Some teams are like that. But as we've seen the Chiefs, and I know the Chiefs aren't necessarily the best example because they have a freakishly good quarterback, but there are plenty of other teams, especially teams who the Chiefs are going to be competing against in the AFC title game and in the Super Bowl, the teams that matter. Those teams will throw. They will throw on first down. They will throw. The Bills will throw early. Now, Josh Allen may take off and run or something, but they will drop him back to pass the ball early. Even the Ravens will to a degree, and part of that is because of Lamar Jackson's ability to run. But the teams that the Chiefs are competing against, they will throw on any down. So the ability to be great against the run on first and second and then take you off the field on third down, that doesn't really exist in the NFL anymore. It will happen from time to time throughout games. You will have drives like that, but that's not something you can count on.
Well, through 2 segments in nearly a full hour, we've talked about one of the Chiefs draft picks.
Yep.
We'll take a break. Whenever we come back, we're not going to have enough time to talk about anyone in real depth, but we'll talk to Matt Derrick in 10 minutes. We'll talk to Jordan Foote in an hour and 10 minutes. Somewhere along the way, over the rest of this show, over a 3-hour radio show, we're going to talk at least a little bit about every single one of the Chiefs draft picks, and we'll get to the audio later.
At JB Brisco, at Beards McFly, at Not That Rudy, at Sports Radio 810. Just do it already. You're listening to Almost Entirely Sports
I hate Nick Bolton, and I hate him because he's a Missouri Tiger.
with Joshua Brisco.
I hate Nick Bolton.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
You know what I just figured out? Is at all times, one of you has to be the world's worst teammate, and the other one
It's never me.
will be a good teammate. But I never get both of you. I absolutely never get both of you.
But you frequently don't get either of us.
That's true. That's 100% true. Quick, Rudy, make your point about the question of would you rather take elite players at less valuable positions or more questionable talents at more valuable positions?
Yeah, the Chiefs drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire last year, 32 overall, potentially elite running back at a less valuable position.
First one off the board.
Yes, and then immediately after, starting with the 7th receiver drafted in the draft, the Bengals drafted T. Higgins.
Yeah.
The 8th receiver in the
him.
draft was Michael Pittman Jr., not as good. The 9th
Great-
receiver in the
great
draft was Laviska Shenault. The 11th receiver in the draft was Chase Claypool.
You also mentioned Michael Pittman, not that good. Who was his quarterback last year? I seem to forget.
What's his name?
It'd be Phillip Rivers. It'd be Phillip Rivers throwing trebuchet
Hey,
footballs.
and let me say, it's not that Michael
him in
Pittman
Kansas City,
Jr.
damn it.
Yeah, it's not that Michael Pittman Jr. wasn't good. It was just more compared to some of those
compared
other
to-
names.
I would like T. Higgins would have been great.
Yes,
T. Higgins would have been a
yes.
blast. Listen, I've been very clear on this. I said this on Times Ours today. Last year I would have taken T. Higgins over Clyde, and this year I would have taken De'Ami Brown over Nick Bolton. If I'm right, I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Either way, I'm still going to have said that thing out loud.
Receiver is now cornerback. The Chiefs are never going to draft one high. It's just not happening. I think I moved receiver into the cornerback position. I'm done thinking they're going to do it. I'm done hoping for it. I'm done wishing for it. My heart's going to be broken. Who's the top running back next year?
I really wish they would have signed Juju still, by the way. That one's going to hurt for
I
a
think
little
he's going
bit.
to be a Chief next year. I think this is a Tyrann Matthew situation. I really do believe this.
A Bashad Breeland situation, a Tyrann Matthew
Yes.
situation. Yeah.
This feels like he's the next one.
Speaking of Bashad Breeland, I think he's going to be back at some point. That'll be among many things we talk to Matt Derrick about next here on Sports Radio 810.
You are listening to Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
I hate Nick Bolton.
the half in New Orleans with the Warriors up 66-54. Steph has 21, Zion 18. This is a Marvel and NBA special edition. So the traditional broadcast on ESPN, the Marvel Arena of Heroes broadcast is on ESPN2. You should check it out. The nightcap of the ESPN doubleheader, Nuggets and Lakers. LeBron out resting that sore right ankle. The Lakers come in having lost 6 of their last 7. Dennis Schroeder expected to miss up to 2 weeks in health and safety protocols as well. How about the Wizards? They're pouring on the points. They had 122 points through 3 quarters. Currently in the fourth, up 123-108 on the Pacers. Baseball, Bryce Harper out with a wrist issue. Christian Yelich, Lorenzo Cain back in the Brewers lineup, and the Phillies lead the Brewers 4-1 as they play the 6th inning. JT Realmuto has a 2-run home run. Mets and Cardinals on ESPN2. Nolan Arenado just connected on a 3-run home run, and St. Louis has just jumped on top 6-5 as they play in the 3rd inning. Francisco Lindor 0 for 2 with 2 strikeouts. He's 0 for his last 20. Terrible news for the Dodgers today. Dustin May, their terrific right-hander, will have season-ending Tommy John surgery tomorrow. Meantime, night in the NHL includes the Bruins. They get a point against the Devils, and they clinch a playoff spot. The last in the East, they're up 2-0. And the Isles Simeon Varlamov shutout streak lasted 248 minutes, second longest in league history. The Sabres' Tage Thompson scored to end that run.
We're back on Tuesday, and we'll find out what Jimmy Garoppolo's future is from Jimmy G himself when he joins us at 9:10 a.m. Eastern, Tuesday. Keyshawn, J. Will, and Zubin on ESPN Radio.
This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco.
The dog needs to be peeing, Josh. Let the dog be comfortable peeing.
Outside! It needs to pee outside. That's where dog pee goes, Matt.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
A lot of urine talk today, which is kind of weird.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not that weird.
It's kind of the norm for the show.
It's definitely not the weirdest that we've ever had anything go. It's just been kind of a decent number of pee jokes today. It's just a little bit weird. I will, on that note, really on no particular note, start off our conversation this week with our friend Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest, who joins us now. You can follow him on Twitter at Matt Derrick. I will start with a formal apology. Last week, Matt said the phrase, "I think it's Nick Bolton or bust," and I laughed. I laughed in Matt's face over the phone because I thought 2 things. One, I thought they would add linebacker depth, but not that early, and I thought Matt was being dramatic for the sake of his Mizzou guy, and then he proceeded to explain why he was being very serious, and then the Chiefs drafted Nick Bolton. So, Matt, it was I who was the bust. They drafted Nick Bolton. I am a fool now and forevermore. I can only ask that you accept my humble apology. You don't have to be humble about it. You can flaunt it all you want, but I apologize profusely, humbly, wearing sackcloth and ashes.
Well, I hope the lesson that everybody should learn here is never argue with the big dog. Big dog's always right. And 2, no, this is not a failing on your part, and no one should hate you, Josh. You know, the Twitterati should not hate you. This is not a reflection of your lack of understanding or appreciation. This is a pure reflection of my greatness.
I'm okay with that. I support that. I think that's good for both of us. In reality, it's probably a reflection of both, but it is certainly a reflection of your greatness. So just you tell me now, in retrospect, with the benefit of hindsight, even though you didn't need it, why did that make so much sense, and why did that happen at 58?
I mean, part of why I thought it made sense, and I thought it was going to happen, is just that the Chiefs did a lot of homework on Nick Bolton. I mean, they were talking to him before the draft. There was clearly a lot of interest. He had some discussions with them. But, you know, the other part of it, too, is that he just really fits what they need. I mean, I do think that he's the complement to Willie Gay in that sense. I mean, they're different players. And Nick Bolton is it projects as a Mike linebacker in the making. I mean, he's a hard hitter. He pounds people. He's not as fast as Willie Gay. There's no doubt about that. But he's very instinctual, and that's another one of those things that the Chiefs like. They love these high football IQ, instinctive players, especially at that linebacker spot. I mean, they would use the exact same thing to describe Anthony Hitchens and Ben Neiman. And the reality of it is that I think Nick Bolton is more athletic than both of those guys. So, put all that together, and I think it makes perfect sense, and I think it explains why the Chiefs love Nick Bolton.
I very much buy the idea that he's less athletic than Willie Gay, more athletic than Neiman and Hitchens. And the thing I was surprised by, though, there's kind of two little things. One is that I think you're right that he projects as a Mike linebacker. He projects as the Anthony Hitchens replacement. Brett Veach said as much on Friday, like kind of explicitly for Brett Veach to be like, yeah, whenever Hitch goes down, like it sounded like a borderline Kyle Shanahan level threat of like whenever Hitch goes down permanently, then Bolton can step in. What do you think is going to happen this year though? Because Veach said today. I think they mentioned this is either from today or Friday. I got audio of Brett Veach saying this. I think it was from today, talking about how he thinks that Bolton can play either Mike or the Will, and I'm not nearly as confident about him being able to take sort of weak side snaps from Ben Neiman, and I'm not as thrilled with Willie Gay as the Sam. I think that he can continue to do that. I know he did a little bit of that last year, but do you have a working theory for 2021 specifically as to how sort of those four guys will work through those three spots, also understanding that the Chiefs spend like 70 to 75% of their time in sub packages?
Well, and remember, I mean, there are a big reason why they spend 70 to 75% of their time in sub packages is that they haven't really had three linebackers they've been comfortable with having on the field at the same time.
Sure.
They prefer to take one of those linebackers off for a safety, namely Dan Sorensen, because that's a better fit for their coverages, because they need somebody at that linebacker spot who can cover, who can tackle, who can do some of those things. Nick Bolton can do those things. I mean, in theory, Nick Bolton, if he works out this year, this season is a Dan Sorensen replacement. I mean, if he plays more, it's going to be, I think, more at the expense of Sorensen and, taking some of the snaps that Damian Wilson had last year, too. You're expecting that Willie Gay is going to pick up some of the workload as well, but I think that at the beginning of the year, I would still expect it to be Hitchens and with Neiman as the backup. Even a pretty good chance that Neiman's the number 3 linebacker at the beginning of the year. That when they do have 3 guys out there, it's those 3 with Gay, Hitchens, and Neiman. But I would expect as the season progresses that Bolton's going to get more and more of that. It wouldn't surprise me by the end of the season that if Hitchens goes out, it's Bolton coming in, and he's got the green dot on. And when they're in some 3 linebacker sets, it's Gay, Hitchens, and Bolton. The catch is just, to me, it's going to be how quickly can Bolton really pick up the defense and pick up the coverages especially? Because that was the problem last year for Willie Gay. No off-season program meant that all he had was training camp. And based on the limited experience that Willie Gay had in college, because he just didn't have the snaps, he didn't have the games in college that other people have had, and certainly Nick Bolton, he started off at a much, later point in development. The benefit with Nick Bolton is that he's got a ton of college experience. He's got a ton of snaps under his belt. So you're hoping that, 1, the learning curve isn't as steep for Bolton, and 2, that they actually get some off-season work, that he gets some OTAs. There's a little bit of an off-season program, so he's not going in August 1st and seeing his first action. I mean, you're hoping that there's a little bit more that can get him up to speed. That to me, I think, is going to be one of the biggest developments for Bolton.
It sounds like you feel more confident about him in coverage than I do at this point. I was talking to our friend Seth Kaiser earlier, and he's got the Bolton film review. We'll talk to him tomorrow on the show. But he's much more concerned about Bolton's ability to step in coverage in pretty much any form. That's the first thing I think of, especially if you think that he's going to be able to take some of Dan Sorensen's snaps. I like that idea quite a bit, but I don't know that he has shown that or did show that in college. Maybe you think that he did, and you can tell Seth to shove it.
I'm not going to tell Seth to shove it. I feel like the consensus was that Bolton is more polished in coverage than maybe some of the other linebackers in this draft. And he's more polished in coverage, certainly, than Willie Gay was at this point a year ago. And so that's at least a benefit that he's got. But once again, I mean, to play it at the NFL level, you've got to be on the work and get in the field and getting that work. And if you don't get that, and you don't even get these, OTA reps and these snaps that you can start seeing the speed, seeing things develop, really the problem, the criticisms that I've always seen of Nick Bolton in pass coverage has been that, he tends to maybe over pursue and play action, that he just bites on the play fake maybe a little bit too much or over pursues, and that gets him maybe a little bit out of position. And, and the other thing is that he's an aggressive player. And sometimes in pass coverage, that means that he misses. And that's something to have to work on. I mean, that is definitely one of the things that Nick Bolton has to improve. The upside with Nick Bolton is that when he hits something, it goes down. There's not going to be a lot of guys breaking tackles from Nick Bolton. I mean, he might miss on a tackle, which has happened to him in college, and it's going to happen, but you're not going to see Nick Bolton hit somebody and they're going to get 3 more yards. They're going down when he hits them.
I'm going to go to Humphrey, and then we'll see. We'll figure out how much time we have to kind of go through some of the other guys. But obviously, the 2 first picks were the 2 first picks by a very wide margin, since there was no third-round pick. And just a few picks apart, they go Bolton and then Creed Humphrey, bring him in, the center from Oklahoma. What did you think whenever you saw that pick, heard that pick announced, first of all?
The first thing I thought was, someone has not already taken Creed Humphrey?
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, how can he still be available? How is he still on the board? That's crazy. The arguably the number 1 center in the draft was still available at 63. That surprised me. But, it absolutely makes total and complete sense. The only thing that honestly surprises me a little bit is that I think that Austin Blythe and Humphrey, I think, are listed about the same as far as size goes. And that makes no sense to me, because Creed Humphrey looks like a brick house. I mean, he looks like he could just knock about down anything in the middle of the field. I mean, I don't know how you'd ever get around Creed Humphrey. And Blythe looks fine, but, and the Chiefs, the scouts that I think even Veach talked about this, about just, the size, he certainly looks and plays bigger than I think Blythe does.
Yeah.
So, that's the advantage I see. I mean, to me, it's a fantastic pick. I mean, I think the Chiefs were probably right. I mean, I still think that they were probably interested in Terrace Marshall, too, who, of course, went right after Bolton. But those 3 guys, they probably could have put them into a hat about which one they chose. I think they definitely chose Bolton because they felt like he was the better fit, the bigger need. But Humphrey's right there. I mean, I think this could be the guy that's going to be center for this team for a long time.
I thought there was a chance pre-Blythe signing that was going to be a big plan of this offseason. And honestly, frankly, maybe before the Tooney signing, where they would prioritize a center to be in front of Patrick Mahomes for the next 4 or 5 years, and maybe, knock on wood, longer than that. So I was tickled by that, because I'd been kind of enamored by the idea of just having to take the baseball term, a battery between the center and Patrick Mahomes for years to come. I like the idea of having some continuity there. I like the idea of having some chemistry there. I like the idea of having a mover in the middle, because one of the things we've talked about so many times about the pass protection, we've talked about Patrick Mahomes drifting back too far. It might be the only consistent thing that a few different times we've seen Patrick Mahomes do poorly or negative things he's done too much. I literally can't think of a second thing right now. But especially with Orlando Brown, this is another thing we've talked about, over the last couple of weeks. But whenever he's not running guys out of the picture backwards like Eric Fisher would, which I hope would mean that Mahomes would want to step up for the sake of the way that his tackles this year should be performing. But you got to have the depth of the pocket to be able to climb the pocket that way. And they have just quadrupled down on the interior just as much as they have on the outside now.
Yeah, and, once again, I mean, it's one of these nuggets that was buried in there that I know you are not going to like me pointing out.
Oh, God.
But, and clearly a big chunk of everything that the Chiefs have done has been to make life easier for Patrick Mahomes. But Brett Veach has said they want to run the football better this year and more effectively. And all these guys do it. Creed Humphrey absolutely can be a big part of that. I thought this when Jody Thuney signed. I mean, I thought the second happiest guy in Chiefs country had to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire, because there's going to be holes now. And I think you saw from last year with Edwards-Helaire, You give him a hole, he can get some yards. Last year he just didn't have any holes. So I think this is good for the entire offense, and it's not just the pass game. The run game's going to benefit too, and that is absolutely part of their strategy. Has been how can they run the football more effectively.
Now,
I just don't want them to run the ball more often.
That's what I was going to chime in. Now, I don't want to slander Brett Veach's name here. This isn't a Pete Carroll. We need to run the ball more. Just when we do run the ball like 5 times a game, because we're obviously going to let Patrick Mahomes throw it 70, we're going to get 100 yards on those 5 carries.
Yeah, I think there's a definite distinction between running the football more and running it more effectively. And this is definitely a more effectively type of approach.
And I'm excited to see Jerick McKinnon have a breakout season. I feel like,
so happy about that signing.
That makes sense. We haven't talked about it, and we are not going to talk about it. But it makes sense that you were very excited about Jerick McKinnon.
He broke my heart back. He was for 2 straight years. He was my sleeper fantasy running back who I drafted, and then who got hurt before the season ever started. Just like, wow, I feel like a big old dummy.
Yeah, well, maybe you are one. You ever think about that, Rudy?
I mean, I know I am.
From the non-Bolton, non-Creed selection, Matt, from the 4 picks in the 4 later rounds, we might have time to talk about all of them a little bit, but which one are you the most optimistic for? Like, if you had to put money down on one of those guys really being a player for this team, who would you pick?
Trey Smith. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I mean, if this guy is healthy, I think he's going to be a Pro Bowler. I mean, I think he's that good. You're not that good in the SEC unless you can play some football. And he's been healthy, it looks like, for 2 years. If they have figured out, Brett Veach did not want to get too much into the medicals today. No one has wanted to get into the medicals on Trey Smith. Mm-hmm. And that's the only possible explanation anyone can come up with for why this guy goes in the 6th round.
Yep.
Because it is a serious medical condition. Let's not sugarcoat it. But if he's able to play and be healthy, this dude is going to be a stud for a long, long time. I mean, this guy was. I get some people had him as maybe a 3rd-round talent, and so once again, that was even factoring in the medicals. I mean, I think if this guy had never had blood clots, he probably goes late 1st, early 2nd. I mean, he's that much of a stud. So, yeah, I would bet the house on Trey Smith becoming the best of the rest.
It's wild that that's what you're saying about the 6th round pick, and also wild that I think you're right. Because also, and this is audio that we'll play, if not later in the show because we never get to all the audio later this week. But like Veach said, they're usually one of the more conservative teams whenever it comes to just taking guys off the board for medical concerns and not wanting to take that gamble. When you're at 226, of course you do it for a guy that you think is probably maybe a late 2nd, early 3rd round talent or something like you said. I mean, that seems obvious. But I also, this is probably me thinking too hard, but why did the Chiefs not even take him sooner? I don't know at what point it becomes too good to pass up, and I'm very glad they got him as late as they did. But I was very, very confused as to why he kept falling, even knowing about the blood clots and everything, because it seemed like, and you asked him about this, that it seems like he's been good for a while now.
Yeah, I mean, some teams in the NFL, the Chiefs have been kind of one of these teams, is that, if they have a red flag for a player on a medical issue, it's not simply that they drop the value of that player down. They simply take that player's name off the board. That's a list of a player that they would not take under any circumstances. That's how usually red flags with medicals work. I mean, in this case, I am sure that there were a number of teams in the NFL who were in the category of Trey Smith's not even on our board. If he's available in the 7th round, we're still not taking him. If he's an undrafted priority free agent, we're not signing him. Chiefs clearly were not one of those teams, but again, it was risk-reward. You have to accept the fact there's a possibility that for some reason maybe the kid can't play, so that knocks him down. And yeah, I mean, I think that the Chiefs will be one of those teams. Usually it's the 5th and 6th round when those guys start going and somebody takes a chance. And in this case, 6th round, he was there.
I think that one's going to be so much fun. Also, if anyone listening right now hasn't just go find a couple of clips, and you're going to just have a great time watching him do pancake a guy and then do push-ups off of him until 3 seconds after the whistle is blown. It's a lot of fun. So with that same group, then who do you look at from the rest of the class, and you go, I don't know. I'm not gonna hold my breath on this guy. I'm not gonna place any bets on this one. Being a totally knock out of the park hit.
I will probably end up being wrong because, of course, other than on Nick Bolton predictions, I'm terrible.
Sure.
But I don't see Noah Gray at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't get it. And I see he's already grown an inch since getting drafted by the Chiefs. One of the knocks against him is that he's an undersized tight end.
Yeah.
In his pro day, he was 6'3" even and 240.
Yep.
And the Chiefs listed him at 6'4", 240.
Yep.
So
Grows
that's
fast.
impressive.
Grows fast.
I gave him 6'3.5" earlier today, which I think ended up on yet another measurement. But I think Dane Brugler's guy had him at the flat 6'3", but whatever.
Yeah, and I mean, and here's the thing. Hey, is Nick Bolton undersized? Sure.
Mm-hmm.
You know who is the exact same size as Nick Bolton?
I don't.
Devin Bush. You can play at 5'11", 240. You can play linebacker at 5'11", 240. You know who is 6'3", 240-ish? Trey Burton. That's who this is.
Yeah.
I mean, at this size at tight end in this league, I mean, I was going through it today looking at who's 6'3" and where the numbers are. And honestly, I mean, the ceiling at 6'3" is Evan Ingram. I mean, that's kind of what you're hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality of it is that, Brett Veach has been looking for his Trey Burton since he got the job as GM.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Blake Mack was an effort to try and find Trey Burton. John Lovett was
guy.
Trey Burton.
Mm-hmm.
Noah Gray is an H-back.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Mm-hmm.
I will probably be wrong because Brett Veach is so much smarter than I am, and everybody in that room is smarter than I am, but I can't shake that this is an H-back. And, yeah, he can maybe do some of the things that Travis Kelce can do, but when it comes to getting downfield and using speed and height, which are just things that he doesn't have, I don't see how that works.
I think that would be my answer there also, where if I said this at the top of the show today, I think at least those last 4 picks have a tremendously wide array of almost equally likely outcomes where for Josh Kando could be this team's starting defensive end for week 1, 2022, and he could literally not be on the team at the beginning of 2022, and I don't think either one of those things would stun me to my core. Cornell Powell could end up being the guy that feasts off of negligence whenever defenses are worried about everybody else. He might not get on the field over Byron Pringle. I really think that those are relatively reasonable statements. But with Noah Gray, either the Chiefs' offense is going to create a way to use specifically him in a way that does have some production for it, and I could see that happening, although whenever you have to create ways for people to be productive, that's can be a bit of a tough sell sometimes. I feel like they have that problem with a guy like McCole Hardman for very different reasons right now. But I also don't. You've got to be able to also play a position consistently, right? I don't know. I feel some of those same questions, I think.
The concern, I think, with Noah Gray from a scheme standpoint is that he can't block.
Yeah.
I mean, he's not big enough to do that. So unless he puts on a ton of weight, that's going to be a problem. And if he's on the field, you're throwing the football. I mean, you just know that you're limiting your options and your ability to disguise what you're doing. I mean, it's going to be pretty clear when Noah Gray's on the field what's happening. And, can he play fullback? Well, once again, he can't really block. So, I mean, if you're going to throw the ball to the fullback and you're going to use him as an H-back, does he have slot receiver possibilities? Sure. But, as even Brett Veach has been today, he's not going to be an inline kind of guy. Mm-hmm. It's not somebody that you can do in that. He's probably would need to really work to even be a kind of guy that could chip a little bit. I mean, he's a pass catcher. And this is really obnoxious. I mean, I shouldn't even say it, but I saw a lot of the highlights, going around oh, look at these great catches by Noah Gray where he's, jumping in the air and one-handing the football.
Yeah.
And all I could think of was, you know what? Kelce would be catching that with 2 hands.
That's right. It'd be hitting him in the face mask. Yeah.
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 It would hit him in the face mask.
Well, listen. I mean, we're all gonna. I like forcing people to say something negative because I want everyone to know what I feel like whenever one of those players works out or whenever one of those players has simply a good play, and that's just the hell we all live in. Let's talk about the other guys then real quick. Josh Kane-Doe had, he was one of the top recruited guys out of high school. He was being recruited just behind Jalen Phillips and Chase Young as edge rushers. I've heard of both of them, unlike Rudy. But obviously also ends up going pick 144, never really put it all together at Florida State, had some injury issues, but feels like a Spags defensive end. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he tests off the charts. His athleticism is absolutely ridiculous. Is the prototype Spags, the end, as Veach talked about today. He is not Tano Passanio. I mean, this is more of a Brett Veach DN than a John Dorsey DN. I mean, Passanio was Dorsey's guy. This is Veach's guy. You're right. I mean, the realm gets it, and Brendan Daly can work with him. They can turn him into something. And you're right. I mean, he could also flame out in a year, and we never hear from him again. There's been a disconnect because the talent, the athleticism has always been there. It just never really translated into production.
Garrick Dieter has tweeted out a picture of two Huskies. This says, just found these guys running on 635. Help. They look like they've probably been out on their own for a little while. Look a little haggard. Not Hagrid. They don't look like the guy from Harry Potter. Your thoughts on Garrick Dieter picking up a couple of two Huskies apparently running around on the highway or by the highway and putting them in the back of what appears to be a very nice car?
That is totally Garrick Dieter, because he and his wife are absolutely wonderful dog people, and Garrick Dieter is a genuinely good-hearted guy. So the fact he's out there rescuing puppies off the streets of Kansas City does not surprise me at all.
Can we get him an extension? Or can he just be
That's what I was going to say.
I'll tell you what, because here's the thing. We want Garrick Dieter on the Chiefs' payroll for as long as Patrick Mahomes is on the Chiefs' payroll, right? At least. Maybe for the rest of his life, I'm fine with all of that. Can't have any Aaron Rodgers situations. Once Garrick Dieter, whenever he's ready to hang up the cleats for whatever reason, could we get him maybe Clark Hunt could funnel a bunch of money to KC Pet Project, and then KC Pet Project could hire him for like $200,000 a year, but it's really Clark Hunt?
I was going to say special assistant to the GM. We got it in baseball. We don't see it a lot in football.
Yeah.
It's time to bring it over.
Matt, your thoughts?
I mean, Mahomes has got a lot of money, and he needs an entourage.
Yeah.
There's no reason why he just can't keep Garrick on the payroll as part of the entourage, because you need those guys.
Even better, Mahomes hires him special assistant to the GM of the Royals. The owner now.
And his main job is taking care of Mahomes' dogs.
It's all the puppies on the team.
If I had $500 million, I'd hire Garrick Dieter to do whatever he wants to. And if Garrick Dieter just wants to hang around playing video games with Patrick Mahomes all day and rescuing dogs off the street, I would pay him for that, because that's just wise money.
Yeah.
You're good for him, Matt.
I am. I take care of people.
If you had $500 million, you'd be a good friend. I mean, you're a good friend now, but you'd be a great friend even then.
You would be a more lucrative friend if you had $500 million.
Yes.
I would be very popular with some people if I had $500 million.
Specifically us.
Absolutely.
We got to this point and talked about everyone except for Cornell Powell, who I think I was actually most excited to hear announced of this whole crew, at least maybe until Trey Smith, because I would have been kind of again following his fall and everything. But what are you expecting right now for Cornell Powell? Like, what's a reasonable expectation, if it's ceiling, floor, timeline, anything that you've got? Because he's a bit of an enigma at this point, as a guy who had like one kind of breakout year at Clemson, but doesn't necessarily have the overwhelming speed that the Chiefs have typically made their bread and butter.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think he had 5 college years, because I think he got hurt one year and ended up getting a medical red shirt out of it.
He's almost 24 years old, so that makes sense. He's 23 and a half.
Yeah, he's played forever, and that's the weird thing, is that he had a huge year last year. Was it simply that it just took that long for it to click? And And that's what the Chiefs said. I think it was Pat Sperduto maybe who was for his scout.
Hold on, I'm going to find it. I've got notes. I was doing so much radio Friday and Saturday.
It was either Dave Henson or Pat Sperduto.
It was yet another Dave Henson pick.
He did get hurt in 2018, by the way.
I've got him with a red shirt due to an academic issue in 2018, so you guys can check.
Well, maybe it's an academic. Okay, yeah. Maybe it is.
Facts.
I just have that he was there for 5 years. He was a junior both in 2018 and 2019.
Correct.
I just assumed it was.
It says red shirt due to academic issue on Dane Brugler's draft guide, which at this point I feel like I should Venmo Dane just like $20 just as like a shout out. But it was Dave Henson. Yeah.
But Dave Henson noted that they had an intern in from Clemson at training camp who told him that, you know what, it clicked. It's the light came on. He's gonna have a big year, and he did. So maybe that was the case. Maybe it finally clicked. The other thing is that Clemson's had a ton of great receivers that he was playing behind.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge there being, if he wasn't good enough to get past them, is he good enough? Very enigmatic. It was a perfect word you chose. That was exactly what I was going to say, and I eventually did. So I'm just parroting you. I could see a lot of outcomes there. I mean, he could be Sammy Watkins. He could be Jehu Chesson. I mean, it's anywhere in between. I wouldn't put huge expectations on him this year. I mean, if he had, 20 catches for 230 yards, I think that's a fine rookie season. I mean, he's the kind of guy that I think you're looking at year 2, year 3 to see if that's when he explodes. I mean, maybe the DeMarcus Robinson career trajectory, you're looking at it, but maybe plus a little bit. So maybe a little bit faster than DeMarcus Robinson. But, I mean, he's a different kind of receiver. I mean, he's going to post up. He's going to be that kind of big, stronger guy in the middle of the field doing some things that tries to free up the other guys. So, I mean, he is going to be the candidate, Sammy Watkins' role, and the role is there for him to take because there's nobody else really to do it.
Yeah. Last thing, non-draft related, I believe that as things currently stand, the Chiefs have 88 players on their 90-man roster this afternoon, and I think it was 3 local time. The compensatory pick equation was thrown out the window, and any picks or any signings that get made don't have anything to do with that anymore. I thought we might have news by now. We do not. What do you think the chances are that this team, which did not draft a corner, what do you think the chances are that Bashaud Breeland is back this year? What do you think the chances are that Melvin Ingram ends up here? And what do you think the chances are that somebody, a veteran edge who's not Ingram, ends up here? I'll take percentages if you'd like on the percentage scale.
Okay. I will probably put Bashaud Breeland at 1%.
Wow, really?
I mean, only because there would be no penalty for signing him before.
Previously, right.
So, that's really could have been done already. And if I could be mistaken, and if I am, I apologize profusely to the Bashaud Breeland family. But I believe he's still subject to potential NFL penalties for the last incident. Because remember, his suspension for 4 games last year was based on a violation of the drug policy.
Yeah.
The substances policy.
Yeah.
So, he could still have a suspension this year, which I think is probably what's holding teams off. So it wouldn't surprise me if it's to wait a while with Bashaud Breeland. I think I would say an edge rusher, say 60%. Just anybody, I think would be a signing. 39%, I'll say Melvin Ingram. I mean, and I don't know if I was supposed to put a corner in there. Any corner besides Bashaud Breeland?
To be honest, I expected the Bashaud Breeland number to be a whole lot higher than 1%. So I'll take other corner also. Yeah, for sure.
Then I will say, let's put probably
little Richard Sherman action. I don't know who else there is. Those are the only 2 guys I know.
I'm going to go 40% any edge player. It's going to leave me at like 19% then down to for Ingram, and the rest would be a corner. So someone wants to do my math because I'm too tired.
No, that's fine. It's been a very long several days. I sometimes I'll ask questions like that and I'll record the responses and try to figure it out. I'm not going to forget that you said 1% Bashaud Breeland though. So that one I didn't need to write down, and then everything after that did get kind of convoluted, and I'm also very tired, so it's fine.
Plus 40, plus 20, so I think 20% corner maybe.
There's a 174% chance that they're going to sign somebody and a 19% chance that they won't, I think.
You've nailed it precisely. I just want to say one more thing before I do go, though, because
Yes.
I was going to say this at the beginning of the show, and
Please.
but now that I can completely derail the show here at the end, but I wanted to bring it back to talking about pee on the show. How many fans do you think peed in Roger Goodell's chair this weekend?
I can't believe I
boy.
forgot to open by talking about your tweet where you were implying that a newly engaged couple was about to fornicate in Roger Goodell's chair in front of thousands of people.
The odds on that seem very, very high.
There's a better chance that someone you believe genuinely in your heart of hearts that there is a better chance that somebody peed in Roger Goodell's chair this week than the Chiefs bring back Bashaud Breeland. And honestly, Matt,
yeah.
I just didn't expect that.
Because I'm going to guess the possibility that someone peed in that chair is close to 100%. and I personally think the Jets fan did something much, much worse.
Well, you know, Matt, you know what would make sense with the Jets fan there?
Oh no.
The Jets did go number 2. Thank you, Matt.
It's at this point that I should say that I thought that if the guy who proposed to his girlfriend there was named Nick, he would be bolted to the altar.
What about airplane food, huh? What about airplane food? What's the deal with airplane food? Thank you, Matt. This has been a real pleasure. We'll talk to you again next week about something. It can't be grosser. Can't be gross. We covered.
Eventually, you will stop inviting me on the show, and I understand why.
Nope. No. I think you have a fundamental.
Nope.
I think you have a fundamental miss. I can't have anybody come on and tell me that Nick Bolton is good at football. I need somebody who can come on and make a joke about a Jets fan going number 2 overall in Roger Goodell's chair. That's what I need. I need more.
But I'm glad to be there for you.
You're the absolute best at it. Thank you, Matt. We'll talk to you. We will talk to you next week, and I don't know how we'll top it. We'll talk about something, probably something gross.
Take care, guys.
Matt Derrick from ChiefsDigest.com. The least you can do is go follow him on Twitter at Matt Derrick and go read his work at ChiefsDigest.com. He's got a book. You can read the book. TriumphBooks.com/ChiefsWin. So it's all in his bio. Did you guys like my? You want me to explain the joke about the Jets? Did you get it? You want me to explain it to you real quick?
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
Is it because they drafted a player from BYU?
Yeah, BYU stands for Big Yucky Undulation, which is what was happening on that stage. Does undulation start with a U?
It does now.
Boom. Sure does. Nailed it. Send this segment to the Marconis.
Did you know you can listen to Almost Entirely Sports anywhere, anytime? Well, you can. Just search for Almost Entirely Sports wherever you get your podcasts. This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco.
Barf, booger, poop.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
During the break, I listened for the first time to Everything Comes Down to Poo, a song from Scrubs, because Matt Derrick texted it to me. I listened to the whole thing, and I wasn't prepared for it, honestly.
There's some good songs from Scrubs. It's a good show. Solid soundtrack.
I lost the Google Doc at some point. So, nope, there we go. I found it. We're good, everybody. False alarm. Beards, go ahead and grab the Creed Humphrey audio there, because I think I want to talk about him a little bit here. As we're going to at least get through the first 2 picks of the draft today, and then maybe we got a whole week of shows. We got shows every night this week, 7 to 10 every night, except for tomorrow. We're 8 to 10. We'll have Seth Kaiser. It'll be great. So we got a full week of shows talking about all these guys in more depth. But we're starting with kind of the headline guys. Nick Bolton took up most of the first hour, the first half of that segment with Matt. You can also follow him on Twitter at Matt Derrick, read ChiefsDigest.com. And Creed Humphrey is simply next up here. And frankly, I think we're going to have a little bit of a harder time talking about Humphrey as much as we probably should, because he's really good at football. His fit in this offense is really obvious. I understand exactly why the Chiefs love him. I understand exactly why they took him. Pretty much everybody feels like that was a good call, a good fit, a good pick for a good player who also doesn't have that super high variance that we talked about for pretty much the rest of the draft class. I just think Creed Humphrey is going to be really good in the middle of the Chiefs' offensive line probably for a really long time.
It sure seems like it.
It would be... For most NFL draft picks, them being a longtime NFL starter, statistically speaking, would be an upset. Creed Humphrey is the guy on this list who I am most confident saying, yeah, I think he's going to be good. He's going to be around for a while. Worst case scenario, I think is, the worst case sort of realistic scenario, I'm going to say, I guess, and maybe as an optimist, is that he's Austin Ryder, or a guy that can start for you and you could upgrade over. But I really think he's going to have a better career than that. I think he's going to be a bit of a menace in the middle. He's also going to play with really good guards on either side of him this year. And I do think that he is going to play this year. If I had to bet on it right now, Austin Blythe is not a slouch. He is not going to get rolled over by Creed Humphrey. He is not going to... I imagine that Blythe will start training camp as the starting center, and one day you're going to see Creed be the starting guy in the middle, and it's just going to stay that way forever. That's my guess at this point. And frankly, if he doesn't start, I'll be a little surprised, but certainly not panicking, because if he doesn't start this year and he does start next year from then on out, it's pretty much the Nick Bolton pick, right? Where it's depth if you need it, and if you don't, you feel pretty good about him starting beyond that. The thing with Humphrey over Bolton is that the Chiefs are going to very badly need a starting center next year or beyond, and I'm not really sure that they're going to need that at the linebacker spot.
Well, and even what they need, and where the value that he can provide even this year, even if Austin Blythe is the starter this year, it's the ability to be, even though they don't really necessarily need a backup right guard, because they have, in theory, one of LDT or Kyle Long, more likely Kyle Long is that guy, but he gives you a guy who can essentially back up 3 spots.
Yeah.
And again, just from what we saw last year, again, we've said plenty of times, that the Chiefs didn't lose because the starting offensive line was bad. The Chiefs lost because the depth just got tested in a way that it's not supposed to.
Yep.
And they don't appear, again, if all 5 starters go down, the Chiefs are probably not going to win the Super Bowl. But they got a lot better.
Let me tell you something crazy.
It looks a lot better.
Let me tell you something crazy. If Orlando Brown gets hurt, it's bad news.
Yeah.
But if Orlando Brown Jr. plays all 17 regular season games, if you can copy and paste Orlando Brown for the sake of this exercise, the Chiefs have a starting offensive line behind their starting offensive line. Joe Thuney is clearly better than whoever would be behind him.
Yeah.
But if that needed to be Andrew Wiley or Nick Allegretti, we saw that happen last year.
Yep.
At center, it's Blythe or Creed. At right guard, LDT or Kyle Long, because I'm putting Wiley and Allegretti on the other side. At right tackle, it's Niang and Remmers. And in reality, because you're not playing two offenses against each other. They're not going first team, second team. In reality, first guard that gets hurt, it might be Lucas Niang that would step in over at left guard if he needed to, if Rimmers is at right tackle, or vice versa. Rimmers started at guard his first start last year was at guard, but he went right out to right tackle because he was only there for one series because Schwartz ended up leaving, obviously, in the Buffalo game, and then he moved out to right tackle. So there's all of that. Here's the other thing, is it provides, it lets everybody go where they're best at right now. It's something that Brett Veach talked about, looking at specifically this pick of Creed Humphrey, about where he fits and how it's going to affect the rest of the line.
Creed's another guy that's played a lot of football. I mentioned earlier we had some flexibility there with Austin and with Joe Thuney. Now with Creed coming in here, needless to say, now you feel good about leaving Thuney where he's most comfortable, and that's at that guard position. And Creed now gives you a bigger center option, and we've been talking about that. Again, it'll be a great competition, and they're going to have to come in here and compete, and may the best man win. Austin's shown that he can come in and play, and he's done that over his career, and shown he can do that at a high level. Creed offers, a bigger body, and it kind of, that pocket and the way that those larger linemen can affect the pocket is certainly different with Creed blocking in there. So again, it'll be great competition, and we have some flexibility now, and we have most importantly, a lot of depth.
You can tell that he's preparing for Creed Humphrey to start, right?
Yeah.
Bigger body in the middle, can move guys around better. Although Matt was saying that Blythe and Humphrey both have similar measurables. They don't look like that. They don't seem to play like that. And even Veach says Humphrey is bigger. But now you no longer even have to think about the idea of Thuney moving around anywhere. Maybe in a hellscape, if Brown got hurt, maybe then you would experiment with Thuney moving at tackle. I don't know. But as things are actually set up right now, you can have a legitimate battle between Blythe and Creed. And really, I think it's if Humphrey's not ready to take on that starting role right out of the gate, then Austin Blythe could be there, and you're not going to be even in worse shape than you were last year. I think essentially the Austins are going to be very, very similar. Maybe Blythe is a better run blocker. Maybe he's a little better pass blocker. Maybe whatever. I think in large part, for the most part, in terms of difference makers, I think he's going to essentially be Austin Ryder, which is fine. I thought they were going to bring back Ryder and then draft somebody just for the sake of the continuity or whatever. But then at that point, you've got an incumbent, to beat out if you're Humphrey, and everything worked out just fine at the center position. But you're right that there's flexibility among all of those guys, and I think and hope at this point that Humphrey ends up starting day one. I think that makes the most sense, both for the immediate and for the long term.
Yeah, and if they hit on Humphrey, which I think we all believe they have, and like you listen to what Matt said about Trey Smith, and I think everybody rightfully so is excited about Trey Smith. Let's just say he's the future right guard, right? He's not going to play. I would be surprised if we see him take real snaps at right guard this year, because there are two guys at that spot, but they're both free agents.
Yep.
If all of a sudden, let's just say he's the right guard next year, you're now talking about an entire starting offensive line under 29, because I'm just aging them all by a year.
Yep.
And you're talking about four of those guys being under 26.
Yeah.
That's pretty exciting.
It's very exciting. And it's a group that could be holding that spot, obviously, because that's the point you're making. But
Yes.
it could be holding that spot down for half a decade.
Yep.
And a bunch of those guys could be doing it very cheaply. And at the very least, like we talked about with Orlando Brown whenever that trade happened, you pay Brown a bunch of money, but Lucas Niang is on a rookie deal for a third-round draft pick. Great. You have Creed Humphrey in the middle as a second-round pick on a rookie deal. Great. You're paying Joe Thuney a bunch of money. You've got all of these options at guard. Maybe it ends up being a sixth-round draft pick in Trey Smith. So not only is it a better line and a deeper line, it's also a younger line, which should only be good on good for years to come. So I'm excited for that. I'm hopeful for that. We'll talk about these draft picks and a little bit more with Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report whenever we come back.
You are listening to Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
This is SportsCenter.
I'm Jim Basketball. It's a Marvel NBA special edition tonight with the Warriors and Pelicans in New Orleans. Steph and Zion playing like superheroes, but Golden State is putting it on New Orleans, 119-100. About 2.5 to go there. Steph, 41 points, 8 threes, ninth game with 40-plus this season. Zion, 32. The nightcap of the ESPN doubleheader has the Nuggets and Lakers. No LeBron resting that sore right ankle. LA comes in having dropped 6 of 7, and Dennis Schroeder expected to miss up to 2 weeks in health and safety protocols. Meantime, the Wizards put 154 on the board tonight and blowing out the Pacers. Russell Westbrook, a triple-double with just 8 shots taken, 14 points, 24 assists, 21 rebounds. The NFL draft is come and gone. Aaron Rodgers still wants out of Green Bay. Rob Domofsky covers the Packers for ESPN. He joined Greeny.
What number % chance would you put the odds that Rodgers is the starting quarterback for the Green Bay Packers week 1?
Dari Noka asked me that exact question on Saturday morning, and I said 5% chance he's their quarterback, and I guess I'm sticking with that.
That's a low number, I'd say. Baseball, it's a game on ESPN+. Cardinals lead the Mets 6-5 in the 6th. Nolan Arenado, a 3-run home run. Francisco Lindor, 0 for 4, 2 strikeouts, 0 for his last 22. His average at 163, slugging at 209. He's 1 for 18 with runners in scoring position. Meantime, the Phillies hanging on to a 4-3 edge on the Brewers, playing the 8th inning. Bryce Harper out. Yelich and Kane back in the Brewers lineup. Lorenzo Kane has gone deep.
Hey, it's Greeny Tuesday. Much more on the NFL draft. I'll tell you all the picks people weren't talking nearly enough about, and a special green list based on May the 4th be with you. See you then, Greeny, starting 10 a.m. Eastern on ESPN Radio and ESPN+.
This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco.
Anyway, thanks again to Jordan Foote for joining us last segment. Sneeze emoji, sneeze emoji, sneeze emoji.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Jordan thought he had emptied the tank leading up to the NFL draft with the 100-100 project we talked about last time he was on with us on last Wednesday. But no, the work has only truly begun, because now, I guess still, this is better for Jordan's numbers. We're talking about 6 guys instead of 100 guys. So the board has significantly narrowed as we'll continue to talk about the Chiefs draft class. Right now with Jordan Foote, you can read his work on arrowheadreport.com, part of the Sports Illustrated Fan Nation Network. You can follow him on Twitter at FooteNoted, F-O-O-T-E, noted, you get it. Jordan, not only did you make it through that, last time we sort of did a little check-in on how you were feeling after 100 and 100 was done. I also happen to know that you just wrapped up your thesis and the draft just happened. Have you been up for like 47 straight hours?
It's been pretty bad, and I feel a little weird because I haven't published an article in like 2 days, I think. So I kind of don't know what to do with myself, but yeah. I did have that 20-page senior thesis, so I've definitely been trying to stay as busy as I can.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you're, feeling the urge to make sure you have something being published somewhere on the internet pretty much every 45 minutes. I think that's a healthy, reasonable way to live your life that definitely won't result in a burnout within the next 47 minutes.
Yeah, we'll just see how it goes. I mean, I'm here for a little bit. I know that I can't write while I'm talking. I haven't mastered that skill yet, so we'll just see how it goes.
And you're here for a good time, not a long time. You're here for at least this segment, so we can make that work. Again, follow him on Twitter at FooteNoted. He'll have incredible. I don't know how long it's going to take before you and Tucker are getting deep into the 2022 draft class. I know he's working on a mock draft already, and you are tweeting about it, and it's all ridiculous. But I want to talk about the Chiefs' actual, real-life 2021 draft class. I'll give you the whole class here. We'll try to work through everybody at least a little bit. But if I give you, of the 6 guys the Chiefs drafted, who right now are you most excited about?
Man, I think it's got to be Cornell Powell. And he's a guy that there's been, the way Brett Veach has talked about him, the way the Chiefs have talked about him, even the clip of you got the call that the Chiefs were tweeting out or sharing or whatever, they seem to really be excited for him. And they lost Sammy Watkins, who's another Clemson guy. They're similarly sized. Their athletic profiles are similar. I don't do comps. I didn't do comps in that series, A, because I suck at them, but B, because that's extra stuff to do. So he did kind of have shades of Sammy Watkins in his game a little bit. Like, he's a physical guy, 6 foot, 210 pounds or so. He's a smooth route runner. It's eerily similar a little bit to Sammy Watkins, and I think that they're going to need someone who can fill that role because Demarcus Robinson, he wants to catch for 1,000 yards and all that stuff. He just isn't that type of player. He's not a Sammy Watkins type guy. So if, I think it's going to take Powell a year probably to get used to the system. He'll start off on special teams and all that good stuff. But long term, this could be a pretty good steal for them.
So what do you think his best quality is, his best trait is? If you are looking into that future where we give him this year to catch up and he's playing special teams this year and maybe works in a little bit here and there and everything, if the Chiefs entrust him with essentially the DeMarcus Robinson role next year, maybe they bring in somebody else anyway, what is it that you think will make him successful?
He works. He's just a hard worker, and sometimes that's an indictment on guys if you have to call them that. This is a good thing with Powell. He is ultra physical. He can route people up. He displays really high effort at the catch point. He'll fight for positioning. He'll box out. Really physical with his hands. He can beat press. He's just the guy where if you need him to run a 5-yard slant and get open like a Sammy Watkins type role where you just need him to be reliable. We saw in the Super Bowl, everyone saw in the Super Bowl, when things broke down, the Chiefs didn't have a lot of dynamic players out there. Watkins was more than likely injured. I thought he was clearly hobbled. Robinson couldn't make anything shake. Hardman just isn't that type of player. So I think the Chiefs are kind of lacking that right now. And if anything, Powell should be able to provide some of that pretty close to immediately for them.
So from this same class, who do you right now just not fully see it for? What do you look at and you go, man, I don't know. That's not what I would have done.
It's hard, man, to pick because I'd like to nitpick all the draft classes and say I did or didn't like these picks, but I guess the Nick Bolton one would be the one that I'm closest to saying I don't like, and I gave it a C+. It's just because that year one fit. Like long term, you're going to have a starting Mike linebacker, and that's fine and dandy. So the 2021 role is kind of what I'm hung up on, especially for a second-round pick. But he has a high football IQ. He processes quickly. He's a big hitter. Like, he's going to step in. They're going to save some money for Anthony Hitchens leaving. So it's just a matter of how often does he see the field. And it was kind of the similar conversation if they took someone like Tommy Tremble with one of those picks where he's only playing like 25, 30% of the snaps. Like, is it worth it for that type of pick? So I think long-term it is, but in the short term, it's kind of a bummer that only probably one out of the two second-round picks will see the field quite often.
So I want to dig into that a little bit because it's something there's been it's a bit of a point of contention depending on who you talk to. We'll talk to Seth Kaiser on the show tomorrow, and he's concerned about Bolton in coverage being able to hang and the trio of guys that end up, however often they're in sub packages, right? Whenever they're in base, who's going to be on the field? We just talked to Matt Derrick, though. He thinks Bolton's going to be able to handle coverage fine and that he can be on the field there. Veach said that it sounds like, to me at least, that he thinks Bolton can play either Mike or Will. He said by that verbatim. Hitch is clearly going to be the Mike this year, I think, and then I guess Willie Gay is your Sam. What do you make of? I mean, you could reach back to Willie Gay if you need to on that. But what do you think about those three guys? Also, Ben Neiman, and how you think those roles will pan out this year?
I hate to say it, and I know that the people listening aren't going to want to hear this, but I'm not entirely sure that Ben Neiman is not the dime linebacker this season for the Chiefs. I mean, it's one of those things where Hitchens is going to be your Mike, no matter what. You're paying him for that. He was good at it last year. Willie Gay isn't probably ever going to be a Mike. Not that he can't process like that, but Bolton, that's going to be his eventual spot. So I was surprised to see, or I guess hear Veach say that Bolton could hold down that Will position partially because you need like a really good athlete who can get out and run. And Bolton's not necessarily slow, but he's undersized. He didn't test very well at his pro day. Coverage is probably his weak link. Not that he's horrible at it, but it's something that you really want him getting downhill, kind of stacking and shedding against the run, kind of what a Sam linebacker would do. And Willie Gay, he has the size for it, but he hasn't really shown a ton of that. So I thought that it was going to be Bolton being the Sam in base, or I guess he could do that Will and see how it goes. Then in the nickel package, he would be the buck, which is what Damian Wilson was last season. So then it would be him and Hitchens. Then Willie Gay doesn't have a feature, so it's going to be interesting to see how the Chiefs feature Willie Gay, because that was a really big point of contention with the pick. Like, does that mean Willie Gay's not going to see the field as much? Does that mean they aren't confident in him? Does that mean he doesn't have a clear role? Ben Neiman's going to be that dime linebacker because he knows where to be, I guess, even if he has a little bit of trouble getting there and doing the stuff that he's supposed to do. So it's going to be an interesting puzzle that they have to figure out, but luckily they have some time to do it, and I think long-term it's going to work out pretty well.
I'm very interested to see how it pans out for 2021, but that's something we'll probably talk about like a really annoying amount, like leading up to training camp and maybe throughout training camp. So I'll let it slide for now. So we can talk about somebody else, like Creed Humphrey, who was a second pick. He just said, it does sound, you think one of the 2 second-round picks is going to have a real role in 2021. You I imagine, think Humphrey is going to start at the beginning of the 2021 season?
I do, man. He's just a really, really, really fun player, and you don't say that a lot about centers, but I mean, you can watch his film and he does pretty much everything well. He has a high IQ. He can do blitz pickups. He can communicate really well at the line of scrimmage. He has good leverage. He's strong. His fundamentals are sound. His footwork is quality. He can get out in space and make stuff happen. So he's a good fit in that zone run scheme that the Chiefs, I guess, have been doing. They kind of have been going against that. I know that we'll talk about the Trey Smith pick, kind of maybe signifying they're moving their concepts in the running game, perhaps. But I think Humphrey, nothing against Austin Blythe. Like, I was listening a little bit ago. You said Austin Blythe is a fine player. He's going to be a fine player. But Creed Humphrey, he has potential to be pretty good. And he has a really high floor. I think he's going to step in and be capable of starting from day one. So it wouldn't surprise me one bit if he won that job in training camp.
Yeah, because with the combination of it seeming like he has a higher ceiling than Blythe, again, a guy that I very much think would be perfectly fine in the middle of that offense, especially with the other 4 guys that would be starting around him. But it seems like Creed has a clearly higher ceiling and also could be doing it for many years to come now, which would be... I don't even know why I'm so enamored by that, but I think it would be wonderful. I would just love to know that there's one guy snapping the football to Patrick Mahomes for 4 years.
Yes, and it would have to constitute the Chiefs paying their center for once, which is something that they haven't done recently, at least with Mitch Morse. That's something that people were really bummed out about. But he's a young guy, and I saw something today, actually, that I didn't even think about. They're making a big deal about him snapping left-handed and how that's going to potentially impact the delivery to Mahomes. And, like, if that is what you're hung up on, that means the player's pretty good. I think if you have to nitpick that much about his delivery and his setup, then I think he's going to be just fine. So I'm super excited. It's not like a sexy pick per se, but I think at 63, I didn't expect him to be there then. He's a guy that could be a rare center that went at the tail end of that first round, where even at 31, when the Chiefs had their pick, it was something that at least I was considering for them. So I think it was a really solid value pick that'll pan out short and long term.
I think it was Veach that brought up the snapping thing in his post-pick presser. They said he can do it with each hand. No, Andy Reid said it because someone, I'm not going to say who it was, but they may have been on the show earlier tonight, texted me and joked about how he needed to cut that and use out of context Andy Reid saying that he usually does it with his left hand, but he's also taught himself how to do it with his right hand. And I honestly, it's something that I've never given any thought to. Like, I understand that there are very few left-handed snapping centers, but if you also had spent no time thinking about that, you can tell me as much and we can move on. But you brought it up, so if you think there's anything to that, I'd love to know, because I simply never even thought about that.
It's like a slightly different rotation on the ball. Like, it's coming into the quarterback's hands differently. That's at least what I've learned in the past couple of days. Because I hadn't even thought about it either. I was like, whatever, he snaps with his left hand, or he can or he can't. Like, it's not going to be the end-all, be-all. And I think with a quarterback like Patrick Mahomes and a smart center like Humphrey, they're going to get that ironed out pretty quickly.
Yeah, I agree. Let's just move down the list then, because Josh Kando. My thesis here for this draft class has been that at least outside of your first 2 picks, and really maybe the whole deal, but especially for the last 4 picks, there is an incredibly wide range of outcomes for all these guys, and being on any end of the spectrum, in the middle of the spectrum, literally nothing would surprise me. If Josh Kando is the Chiefs' starting edge rusher, either opposite Frank Clark or maybe even in place of Frank Clark because his money is about to get easier to move on from next year, I would not be surprised. And if Josh Kando never gets 25% of the snaps in a given season, I would not be surprised. What did you make of his pick and his game, understanding his backstory as being this incredibly highly recruited guy out of high school who never fully put it together at Florida State?
It's a fine 4th-round pick. And even, I think you tweeted out when the Chiefs made that selection, you were kind of rounding up the scouting report grades for him, and everyone had him a little bit lower than a 4th-round pick, but the upside is legit. I mean, everyone talks about athletic profiles and how they translate to the edge rusher position in the NFL, and it's more than pretty much any other position. Like, there's a couple that are above it, but it's super important, and he has that. He has the athletic profile. He fits the Spags height, weight, arm length measurement parameters. He has the potential. I mean, he's battled some injuries in the past. He has inconsistent tape. He's a little raw as a prospect, but he's a project pick, man. And for a 4th-round guy, you could do a lot worse than that, I think. And the possibility that it pans out is solid. It's there. There's definitely a non-zero chance that Josh Kando can be a starter one day. And there's also, like, people compared him to Passanio.
Yeah.
And it's just not a great comp because Passanio was really long and big and explosive, but like he didn't have the agility, he didn't have the bend, all that stuff. Kando has all of that. He is a legit, very good athlete, and I believe if he can be developed well, stay healthy, he's entering a low-pressure situation the Chiefs don't really need. They have a guy like Mike Dana who can defend the run on your 1st and 2nd down, and then they have Taco Charlton who can come in on 3rd down and wreak havoc. So I wouldn't be surprised if he didn't see very many snaps this season, but also wouldn't be surprised if down the road he turned out to be a pretty solid player for them.
I'm glad you mentioned Passanio and also the specifics of that's not a great comparison, because there's a point where I do want to compare them and a place where I do not want to compare them. And I'm even going to bring Breland Speaks into the party. Those 3 football players are incredibly different football players who all happen to have been listed as playing the same position. I say listed as because Breland Speaks probably never should have been. But they're 3 incredibly different football players and incredibly different types of projects out of college, but they were all prospects who were supposed to develop into being useful edge players for the Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason that I keep bringing them up is because Passanio was a 2nd-round pick. Speaks was a 2nd-round pick they traded up for. Kando went 144. With I think you would probably agree on this, more tools than either of those guys 2 full rounds later, which for me makes me less stressed out about it than I was for Passanio, than I was for Breland Speaks, because if Kando doesn't work out, it still feels like a good bet. And I like being able to say, hey, this is either a good bet or a bad bet, regardless of the result. You have to be able to analyze that before you know the result of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And 4th-round picks don't pan out all the time in the NFL. Like, it's not like he is a 1st-round swing or a 2nd-round swing where you're really missing out if that pick doesn't happen. And I believe Passanio was a 2017, so he wasn't even necessarily a Beach guy. It was a different system, different team. So people bring up that the Chiefs are notorious now for not developing edge talent, I guess, because Mike Dana hasn't progressed in 1 year past. He played pretty well for a 5th-round pick, I would say, and they just haven't had a ton of young, like Tim Ward. I mean, what do people expect the Chiefs to make out of the group that they've had? And I think that Breland Speaks, obviously, there are multiple things that did go wrong, that could have went wrong, that just different evaluations, different positions that he could have fit or didn't fit at, then coming into camp out of the shape or whatever was happening there. A lot that needed to be unpacked. And that is definitely a less than stellar Brett Veach. That was his first draft, right? First impression for trading up and making that selection. So Kando, two rounds later, like you said, it's a much better value pick. He has more tools. He has the higher potential, the higher possibility of reaching that potential. And I think there's really nothing wrong with the pick, even if it is maybe around a little bit too early. That's okay.
I think the maybe most unique, most sort of interesting pick, at least in terms of not really knowing exactly how he's going to get used, is the next one with Noah Gray. They traded up for him, but they didn't give up a pick to do it. They moved up without losing volume, as Brett Veach has talked about, which I was very happy to see, at least that element of it. Noah Gray is very interesting to me because even Veach has said maybe he's an inside slot receiver, maybe he's an H-back, maybe he's a fullback. He's a bit undersized to be an inline player. What is Noah Gray?
Noah Gray is a few things. And luckily I knew a little bit about him when the Chiefs drafted him, and I was at work. So I just pulled out my phone, and I believe Tucker Franklin was on writing duty that day.
Yes.
So I sent him the little blurb and said, man, it's a fun pick. I think that he has some wiggle to his game. I hate using that word, but that's the way to describe it. He has some wiggle. He has yak potential. He doesn't have a great catch radius because he's only 6'3", 240. He doesn't have crazy long arms or anything, but he has reliable hands. He's versatile. He can be used as an H-back, and that's probably the best spot for him to commit to run blocking and stuff like that. But then you wonder about what the fullback situation is going to be like because the Chiefs already have a player who could fill that role. Their tight end room is now very deep. So this season, how Noah Gray is used is going to be really interesting. But long-term, I think the Chiefs may have struck gold on a tight end too. And that remains to be seen. But his baseline athletic profile and the stuff he can do will help quite a bit.
So I am intrigued to hear you be that optimistic about it because he seems like the guy for me that really nothing would surprise. If he becomes like a nice little weapon in the offense that does some things, I feel good about that. Depending on how the Chiefs use him, I trust the Chiefs to have an offensive plan for him. I think if they didn't, they wouldn't have picked him and say we'll just figure it out later. But also, it seems like I don't know. Talk me off of this, I guess. Here's what I need to talk me away from. Whenever there's a guy that gets drafted and what you say is, well, he's not this, that, or that. He's not anything you're used to seeing at this position, but maybe he can, but he's got the tools to do this. He could be this. He could be an offensive weapon is what they call Dexter McCluster. It's unfair to bring Dexter McCluster into this, but that's what I remember. I called him an OW, an offensive weapon. Whenever you have a guy that you say, well, we're just going to find a way to use him. Sometimes that guy ends up being a star and a value because everybody overlooked him because he wasn't a traditional box filler, box checker. Mm-hmm. But sometimes he never turns into anything because he doesn't check the boxes. Like I guess it's kind of simplistic, but I just feel like I can see both of those realities relatively easily for Gray.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I'm going to do a really bad job of talking you off of that because I kind of agree, and it comes down to what have the Chiefs missed at that backup tight end position since
good point.
Demetrius Harris left, and what do they need, and what does he bring? And they need someone who can catch the ball when it's thrown to him. He can do that. I'd say he could probably get open as good as a Blake Bell, if not better than a Blake Bell. The blocking is going to be the interesting part. And I wrote an article of this man probably 6 months ago, well, maybe 3 months ago. It's all a blur now.
It's all a blur, dude. It's all a blur.
Yes, it was pre-draft stuff. So it was at least 3 months ago. But anyway, it was about how often the Chiefs use 12 personnel, and the figure was like identical the past two seasons. It was really close. So they haven't really made that a major part of their offense. I think it was like 19%, and I could be totally off about that, but I'm pretty sure that's what it was. So it's just something they aren't really instituting a lot with the playbook, and part of that's probably because they don't have the personnel, but part of that's probably because they can move Travis Kelce around. They have Tyreek Hill. They have guys who were dynamic. Sammy Watkins was there. So, I mean, it'll be interesting, and Gray does bring some things to the table. I wouldn't be surprised if he never really manifests into the tight end too, but also with the stuff he can do, I think that it is definitely possible that he does that.
If you had to bet on one of the two, you said Powell was the guy that you were most intrigued by. If you had to bet on one of those two guys panning out and becoming a relatively significant role player, who would you bet on?
Definitely Powell. I think Powell's a guy that, not even necessarily optimistically, like within his rookie contract, I think he could be a starting X receiver. And I think that there's a definite possibility of that. And then Gray, it's just kind of hoping that he turns out to be what they drafted him to be.
Let's talk about Trey Smith then, because it is very weird and very funny and very unusual to get to a point where we're arguably the pick that has most excited at least a subset of Chiefs fans is a guard taken in the 6th round. But Trey Smith is certainly not a typical late-round offensive line prospect. Obviously, with the fact that he fell due to medicals with blood clots and lungs and all of that, which appears to be, from everything the Chiefs have said, not really a legitimate concern for them anymore. What are the Chiefs getting there?
They're getting a mauler, and a guy that I mentioned at the top of our conversation, that it goes against kind of that outside zone stuff that the Chiefs are used to doing, where they don't ground and pound. Clyde's just not that guy with that system, but if they can get some push and some momentum up front with guys like Joe Tooney, with guys like Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith down the line, I'm just going to get this out of the way. There is a shot that Trey Smith becomes a starting right guard for the Chiefs, and that is absolutely insane for a 6th-round pick, and usually 90% of the cases, you'd never say that about a 6th-round pick. Oh, this guy has a clear path to potentially being a starter, but if you take those medical concerns out of the way, you're looking at like a 3rd-round pick, maybe even a 2nd-round pick. He has really heavy hands. He's strong. He has really good size. I believe he's 6'5", like 320. I mean, he has good size for the position. He tested well at his pro day, which was a welcome sight, because personally I was worried about him being able to get out in the 2nd level and kind of take proper angles, flip his hips and close them, clear space. So that's still kind of a worry, but overall, man, the medicals that they check out, and he just kind of develops, takes it slow for a year, especially with LDT being a free agent next season, with Long being a free agent next season. The Chiefs could have their offensive line set, and I think it was Rudy. I know I give Rudy credit for everything, so even if it wasn't, it probably was Rudy.
Yeah, it was me.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, brought up that they're young.
Yep.
I mean, they have a specific skill set. They all can do different things. And I think that could combine to be something pretty special.
I can't help myself to go back and mention that. I just think it's funny because you mentioned how rare it is. Like, you're very much correct. But in 2014, the Chiefs drafted 2 guards in the 6th round who ended up being starters. Like, Zach Fulton and LDT were both in that draft.
Wow.
And they've just had so much success also later on. You'd have to go a few years in the future to see them try again. Khalil McKenzie in 2018 did not work out. But Nick Allegretti in 2019 as a 7th-round pick, I think is reasonable to say that he did. Yeah. Forced into action and was decent there. But that LDT Zach Fulton draft, I think about way more often than a normal, like, healthy person would. It's just something that I can't help myself. But boy, it would be a lot of fun. So, all right, so if I give you kind of a larger scale view, then draft class as a whole, how do you feel? And was there anything that slipped by where you went, man, I really thought they were going to address this, or maybe there was a chance they had to take a player somewhere else? You mentioned not being terribly high on Nick Bolton, so I'm guessing there's probably somewhere else at 58 you would have been more excited about.
Sure. Overall, I'd probably give the draft class a B, which compared to Brett Veach as a whole, I think that's pretty good. He didn't exactly have the greatest track record when it comes to drafting, especially early on. So he didn't blow either of his 2 second-round picks. He didn't trade up to go reach anybody. The trade he executed later in the draft was great because he didn't lose any ammo. He just kind of changed where he was picking. So I think that he's getting smarter as a GM as he goes along, which is fantastic. And at 58, man, you look at that board at wide receiver, and the Powell pick definitely helps because I think he could turn into a reliable player. But Diami Brown was still there. St. Brown was still there. Tylan Wallace was still there. Like, it just looked really, really appetizing there at 58. And I was like, man, the Chiefs have to do this. And then they didn't. Then at 63, I was like, okay, well, there's still, like, basically the same options there. So the Chiefs will go wide receiver here, and then they didn't. Then in the 4th round, they didn't. Then 162, they didn't. So I was a little bit worried. And then Powell, I had completely forgot about Powell. Like, I thought he was off the board. So that was a great pick. And then I kind of expected a cornerback in there somewhere. And that's probably just me looking into the future and wishing that they could have got like a 6th round talent at cornerback, like a Bryce Thompson or whatever. But They got a kid as an undrafted free agent. I think it was Marlon Character. It was DiCaprio Boodle. They got a couple defensive backs that those guys you can't really expect too much from other than camp bodies and being competitive. But they're going to have L'Jarius Sneed. I think there's a certain someone that you tweeted today they need to pick up the phone and give a call.
Yes.
That would definitely, at least this year, kind of solidify that group more than it already is.
I was going to ask you about this because I just sort of as a roster building question. Obviously, I would love for them to bring back Bashaud Breeland for another year. I'd be very happy about that. We asked Matt Derrick about that last hour, and I asked for a percentage chance that the Chiefs would bring back Bashaud Breeland. Did you hear his answer by any chance?
I did not. What was it?
What do you think it was? What do you think the chance was? What would you get? What would you say the chance is? However you want to play that.
I'm going to guess what Matt's was first, and then I'll go after. I think Matt said 10%.
He said 1%.
Oh, wow.
I was floored. I'm still surprised. Because I would have been on the other side of 50, I think. I would have said it's more likely than not. And that might be me being hopeful more than anything. I trust Matt, but what were you going to put at?
I was going to say 25, but hearing that, I guess I'll bump it down to 20. Like, I think someone, and this is absolutely ignorant of me to bring up, but someone tweeted a picture of him on his Instagram story wearing his Chiefs stuff, which does not mean anything at all. And I was like, oh, cool, Bashaud Breeland doesn't hate the Chiefs. He's still wearing their gear. So that didn't, completely close the door on that, unless he's like me, where he'd just be too cheap to buy something else, which could be a development there. There are athletes like that. But he fits a need. He hasn't. Man, it's been a weird career arc in terms of salary for him, because he was with Carolina and then had that foot injury that got infected, and then he didn't get his big contract, then came to the Chiefs and had that police altercation or whatever when he was at the gas station, so then that kind of messed up his market. Then he couldn't cash out again. Like, he's had multiple opportunities, and he's a reliable corner for that team. Like, he's probably a top 40 corner in the league, and there's definite value in that, but he just hasn't, for some reason, been able to translate it to financial compensation. And I think he's either 29 or 30. Like, it's time's running out for that to happen. So if both sides I think it's a situation where if the Chiefs pick up the phone, he's going to come back. And that's just how it goes. But the likelihood of the Chiefs doing that, I'd say, especially after Veach's comments about them having a couple free agent signings potentially on the table, I mean, if it's over 50%, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I'm just going to go 20 because I think I've just had all the joy beaten out of me through football over the years and the draft process and all that. But I definitely wouldn't be surprised to see it happen.
I'm holding out hope. I imagine also I'm holding out hope for someone amongst the edges. You're right. Veach mentioned that today, and as of right now, no one's corrected me on this, so I'm going to keep saying it. I believe the Chiefs have 88 players on their 90-man roster. Are you imagining right now? You know what? I don't need you to guess. I don't need you to predict it. If you are the GM and you've got 2 roster spots right now you're looking to fill, is it corner and edge?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's Melvin Ingram or somebody. I don't really know the edge market right now and what it consists of, just because the Chiefs have kind of been adding talent there, and I think the Kando pick amounts to something. But definitely, I think Olivier Vernon is still out there, and he's more of a name than I know actually how he plays, so that's something you have to dive into. But I keep thinking of Richard Sherman at cornerback, and I'm probably in the extreme minority here. I think I've only seen 2 other people tweet about that with the Chiefs, and he's really smart. He's old. He doesn't really play a lot of Chiefs-style football, especially throughout his career. He's been like a cover 3 type corner throughout the majority of his football shelf life, so it would just be fun, I think. I think that he could pick up on that. He wants to play for a contender. He's a big name. He probably isn't looking to break the bank right now, so selfishly, I'm rooting for that to happen for the Chiefs, but Bashaud Breeland has the familiarity, and I think that would be a fantastic pick. And I know you brought up, it keeps L'Jarius Sneed on the inside for another year. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing, because that guy, why force him out? Because I'm 100% in the camp of the outside, a valuable corner shutdown guy he's more valuable than your slot. But the slots in today's NFL don't suck.
Right.
Like there was a definite market in the draft, like Elijah Molden from Washington. People were like, "Oh, the Chiefs could take him at the beginning of the second round, or even trade up for him. He could start at slot. Like he's a perfect option. Tyrann Mathieu can play in the slot." It's something where in the modern NFL, with guys running around and pre-snap formations changing and stuff like that, slot corners are super valuable. L'Jarius Sneed has the size to be a lockdown corner on the outside, but he's also like 23, probably. Like he has a lot of football left ahead of him, and until the Chiefs absolutely have to do that, I'd be fine with him staying inside.
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, which makes sense because you started by saying that I said something, so I guess it would be weird for me to disagree with that all of a sudden, but I agree with you 100%. Jordan, thank you as always. I guess we'll get to talk about non-draft stuff next time we talk to you, which will be weird, but I don't know. Maybe it'll be a welcome little change of pace. Maybe eventually we'll have to talk about baseball. Maybe we'll have you on to talk about the NBA playoffs at some point. I don't know. We'll figure it out when we get there.
Yeah, I'll have to recalibrate my brain to get all that stuff figured out, but I think we can set something up.
Just start deleting scouting reports now. Like, you can get rid of 90 of those pretty easily, I think. So you can just go ahead and empty that folder out.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, man.
Jordan Foote of Arrowhead Report. Follow him on Twitter at Footnoted, FOOTENOTED. He really does do everything else also. I don't... As someone who doesn't sleep enough and does too many things, I think Jordan doesn't sleep enough and does too many things. Like, I'm saying that.
Yeah, he's young.
That's true. He's still got the spark of life in there somewhere.
He's not old like us.
We really are washed, man.
I mean, I just tell people I'm 18 with 12 years of experience.
That I think Beards is going to make that a liner, and I think at that point you'll find out how creepy that sounds.
Yep, probably.
I know that wasn't the intent.
Nope. But I hear it.
It was the result. Follow him on Twitter at Footnoted. We'll talk more Chiefs draft and maybe try to make sure. Maybe we'll have an intervention with Rudy whenever we come back.
Want more Almost Entirely Sports? Watch the show live on the Sports Radio 810 Facebook page. This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco.
Whenever we come back, we'll talk about football. That's a promise that we probably will not be able to live up to. That's next.
On Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Thanks again, Jordan Foote, for joining us. Go follow him on Twitter @FootNoted, please. He's so good at everything and does so much content and works so hard. Go follow him on Twitter. That's what you do. FOOTENOTED. You can check out his work at arrowheadreport.com. We're obviously, at this point, going to have to spill into tomorrow to get to some of the audio and some of the lower players that we haven't talked about as much here today. And also, I've got more audio that I would like to get to today. We'll figure it out. I got some thoughts about Brett Veach's maneuvering in this draft. We'll get to it over the course of, we're going to have plenty of time to talk about stuff just this week. Here's what I want to talk about right now. We're going to take a little sports break. We've been very sportsy, very drafty. Beards is totally disengaged at this point, partially because Beards right now, it's Friday for Beards. It is holiday Friday for Beards. He's gone. You're gone Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yep. Beards is so out of it right now that he's giving me a thumbs up as an answer to that before turning on his microphone and saying, "Yep." Beards is going to get a break. Beards is moving. Are you getting a COVID shot?
Yeah, on Thursday.
One of the two. First one. Okay, you'll be fine. First one, I don't think most people have side effects for him. I got my second one yesterday, though. So if you're watching on Twitch or Facebook or YouTube or whatever, and it's like, boy, Josh keeps stretching a lot. I got it yesterday at 1, and I didn't have any. I went to bed late, and the pharmacist or whatever that gave me the shot said that usually within 24 hours you'll know if you're having side effects or not. And I got. By the way, hey everybody, could you go get your shot, please? Thank you. I said thank you, so now you have to do it legally. Otherwise, you lied.
You're supposed to double dog dare them.
Hey, I double dog dare you to go get your COVID shots. But I am now at like 30 hours after the fact or whatever. Mm-hmm. I had absolutely zero side effects for the first 24 hours. But in the last few hours, I've just got under my armpit is a little sore. My tricep is a little sore, but stretching does nothing, but I keep doing it, which just makes into my side effects, which is much better than having COVID.
So I got the obviously tetanus shot about 3 weeks ago, and I had a very similar thing where the first like my mom was telling me like, your arm may hurt tomorrow, and it really didn't. And then it was the day after that. That's when my arm was just a little sore.
It's just a little.
It's a little sore.
It doesn't hurt.
Big. No,
I'm not dying.
It's a little sore. But you are right though. Like
it's a little
just
annoying.
It's like a natural side effect that like the other day, the last week, I'm pretty sure I just like strained a ligament a little bit. Nothing big, just moving stuff, strained a ligament. There's nothing you can do for that. But I just kept stretching it, kept stretching my arm, just like, why is it hurt? I'm not doing anything that's going to help it in any way. But that's just like a natural side effect.
It feels like if I stretched it, it would feel better, and then it doesn't really. It doesn't. It's just sort of distracting.
But it makes you think that it's going to.
I just want it to. I want to shake it out, and it's not quite doing anything.
Ice Pyro says the second shot gave him a fever. I think that might just be because you're a pyro.
That makes sense. Yeah, you probably run a naturally high.
He did say it wasn't that bad, but he did call him sick. And here's the thing: if you don't want to get the vaccine so you don't get COVID, get the vaccine so maybe you're feeling a little under the weather and get a day off from work.
Hey, listen, everybody.
Very least.
Listen.
It's a free day off.
If you're a boss, legally, you have to stop listening right now for like 15 seconds. Just take a sick day on the day that you're gonna get your second shot.
Do it
anyway. Maybe the day after. Yeah. Just plan ahead. Hey, whenever I get vaccines, it just kind of makes me sleepy for a day, and then get your shot, and then get your COVID shot, and then just 6 tequila shots. Now you're partying.
Hey bosses, stop listening for about 15 more seconds.
15 more seconds, bosses.
Here's the game plan. You schedule a second shot for about Thursday at noon. Oh! Because here's the thing. Nobody's going to make you go back to work the rest of the day. They're going to be like, yeah, no, that's cool. Now you get a half day. Now, you're also calling in sick on Friday.
That's a great idea.
And now, you know what? 3-day weekend, baby.
3.5 days. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, schedule it right after lunch on a Thursday. Yeah. At least do yourself a favor and do it on a Friday. Whatever you do, don't do it on a Sunday like an idiot. I got both of my shots on Sundays.
Who would do that?
That's kind of weird. I don't know if I planned that. I planned the last one. I just took the first one I could.
Yeah.
I didn't think about it well enough, clearly.
I just came up with this idea, so I'm getting my first shot on Wednesday. So, again, bosses, stop listening.
Hey, stop. 15 more seconds.
I may be doing this in a couple weeks.
Anyway, it's just a little
Dump
annoying,
that,
and
Beards.
I figured I would. Beards, dump it!
Dump it, Beards!
We're not recording. We're fine.
That would not be fine. I would be sad if this was all lost just into the thin air. Can you believe that podcasts used to not exist?
Whew. We got backups. There's 4 video streams going.
Yeah, but you're not gonna stay to fix that. You're out of here, man.
Yeah.
You right now are planning. You're basically doing what we're saying to do. You're just ahead of us. It is kind of wild to think about for like 2 seconds that for the vast majority of broadcast history, you would say words into this microphone, they would go out over the air into people's radios and cars, and they would be gone just as soon as they passed through your ears. People might remember it. People might, maybe you could set up like I guess you could record it in some way. We obviously have a bunch of little like
There's some tape
old
decks.
floppy disks, basically.
There's radio stations that probably have a storage unit full of tape decks.
But
cassettes,
you were
know?
either there to listen to it or you
Yeah.
weren't. That had to be kind of freeing in some ways, right?
A little bit.
It's probably like
Yeah.
doing like a comedy show without phones or whatever. Like
Yeah.
you're just freewheeling it.
No consequences.
Well, I don't think that's true.
Back in the good old days, you could do anything.
You could curse. What are they gonna do? How they gonna tell that? Hey,
They don't know. They don't
hey,
have a copy.
Whoever called in and reported it, effing liar. Ah, damn it. Oh, I said it again. I'd say it's kind of weird. All right. Well, I knew we had to have one short segment this hour to fix the clocks, and there it is. My arm is a little
Just a little.
distracting,
Yeah.
and it's
And
crazy.
that brought us around to the existentialism of radio.
And it's kind of, oh, no, not even close, Beards. You want to have that conversation? We will have to use the next segment to talk about in depth, thinking about how existentially wild that is, that we put so much work into these shows every day. And I put so much work into these shows every day.
Do you?
Yes. And after they're done, maybe someone will listen to the podcast, but even then, no one re-listens to old episodes of a sports radio show. You're not going to go listen to my pre-draft analysis, me talking about De'Ami Brown. He's not a Chief. You don't care. I get it. I don't care.
At least 2 years from now, somebody will go back to you trashing Nick Bolton when he's obviously winning Defensive Player of the Year with Clyde Edwards-Helaire as the MVP.
I just want to be fairly represented on that one is all. That's just the only. If you want to say that I trash the Chiefs for drafting a running back in the first round, that would be accurate. If you want to say that I have a personal vendetta against Nick Bolton,
Brett Veach's job,
that's not accurate. I wish what I said disappeared immediately. I've gone full circle on this one. I wish this disappeared because you can say you said you're gonna get tased. Tased?
I never said
Hell are you
that.
talking about? I've never said I was gonna get tased if the Chiefs are gonna.
Why would I say such a thing?
What are you talking about?
That's crazy.
It's never gonna happen. I would never say such a thing. You've got no way to prove it. And also, all of our work is inherently meaningless, fleeting.
We're all just a speck of dust.
A speck of dust floating in the great beyond, saying sports words into the great beyond.
All we are is dust in the wind.
Whenever we come back, we'll break down Noah Gray.
At JB Brisco, at Beards McFly, at Not That Rudy, at Sports Radio 810. Just do it already.
Winter is coming, so plan now to keep those bugs out with Augustine Exterminators. Now is the time to establish and or maintain a barrier around your house. Don't let it break down. At Augustine Exterminators, they have you covered. Augustine Exterminators is a family-owned, local business since 1966. All of their techs are certified in both Missouri and Kansas. In fact, check out their amazing reviews from all their KC area customers. They're also a Quality Pro and Green Pro company. Augustine also does carpet, rug, air duct, and tile cleaning. They have an excellent referral program as well. Refer a new customer, and you and they get $25 off their next service. That's right. Refer a friend, and you both get $25 off your next service. Shop and buy local with Augustine Exterminators. Call Augustine Exterminators today at 913-359-8627 or go online at AugustineExterminators.com. And Augustine is looking for qualified technicians. So call today at 913-359-8627.
Listen up, sporting fans. Central Bank of the Midwest invites you to score a better banking experience with our new sporting checking account. Now you can show off your team spirit at the match or on the go with the official sporting debit card. Plus, you'll gain access to Central Bank's award-winning mobile app with more than 30,000 reviews and a 4.9-star rating. So, score big today by opening your sporting checking account at any of our convenient Central Bank locations or by visiting sportingchecking.com. Member FDIC.
We're often asked, aren't all lawn and tree services the same? This is Larry Ryan with Ryan Lawn and Tree. The answer is no, we're not all the same. Quality starts with 3 Ps: people, passion, and products. At Ryan, we take the time to hire the right people for every position, many with forestry, horticulture, and turf degrees. And 100% employee ownership means that you have an owner in every one of those clean red trucks. An employee owner who is passionate about your lawn and the products he puts on it. The same top-level, no-filler, professional-grade products he uses on his own lawn and trees. I think there are a lot of reasons that Ryan Lawn and Tree enjoys more 5-star reviews than any other lawn and tree care company. But I also think that ultimately it comes down to the people, passion, and products in those clean red trucks. Check us out online. Schedule a free estimate. I think you'll see what I'm talking about as soon as you meet your Ryan Pro. Visit RyanLawn.com.
Did you know that about 20% of all U.S. dollars were created in 2020? Yeah, most people don't know that. What do you think the effect of all those newly printed dollars will lead to? Inflation? Maybe. Certainly it won't lead to the dollar becoming more valuable. In the past, people have purchased gold and silver as a hedge against inflation. That's because gold and silver have increased in value as the purchasing power of the dollar decreases. Buying real gold and silver, the kind you can hold in your hands, much easier than you think. You can have it delivered securely and privately to your home, or you can even put real gold and silver in your IRA or 401k. If you are at all concerned about the value of the dollar continuing to decrease or the risk of inflation, you should call the Oxford Gold Group right now at 833-600-GOLD. The Oxford Gold Group sells real gold and silver for the lowest prices. Call 833-600-GOLD. They'll answer all your questions and send you their precious metals investment guide. Get gold you can hold or get real gold in your IRA or 401k today. Call the Oxford Gold Group right now, 833-600-GOLD.
A reading from the Golden Oak Lending Book of Mortgage Lingo.
What is a no-charge appraisal? It's never asking for a credit card or charging for a home appraisal if we can't close your loan.
No risk on refinancing, but I live for danger.
With our rates at a low 2.25%, refinancing with Golden Oak is anything but risky business. Get started today at goldenoaklending.com.
NMLS 114937, 2.25% fixed, 3.195% APR. FHA 15-year mortgage with 20% equity and approved credit. JLB Corporation, 8595 College Boulevard, Overland Park, Kansas.
This is Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco on Sports Radio 810 WHB.
Couple comments from the Twitch to close this out. We're not going to talk about Noah Gray right now. We will talk about all these guys over the course of the week, though. So if you want more, that's not just Nick Bolton, Creed Humphrey, and the overarching views, we'll get to the rest of the week. But Ice Pyro said, I went back for the sad fans of the Super Bowl run. And Aspen58 said, I've gone back to listen to the show the day the Thunder Jazz game was called off and everything started getting canceled. So,
yeah.
Not a totally fleeting existence.
Nope.
We matter.
Yeah.
We matter.
Ish.
We're a radio show of record.
Yeah.
That
I don't
spent
matter.
a lot of time talking about pee and poop today among all of our draft coverage. Thanks to Matt, Derrick, and Jordan Foote. Follow both of them and what am I? And read their work wherever it's published. We'll talk to you again tomorrow night at 8 o'clock. Seth Kaiser at 9 tomorrow. Until then, bye, Mom.
You are listening to Almost Entirely Sports with Joshua Brisco on Sports Radio 810 WHB.